You open your eyes in the damp chill of a cave. The scent of last night's fire still clings to your skin, mingling with the musky odour of the old animal hide wrapped around you. Somewhere in the darkness, water drips steadily, its sound weaving between the soft breathing of those still asleep nearby. Outside, the first light of day slips through cracks in the stone pale, grey-green, like a thinly stretched hide of sky. You shiver, not from the cold, but from the knowing. Today you must go out, must bring something back, or the group will have nothing to eat tonight. You're not in the age of phones or airplanes. You're over 20,000 years in the past, where each step might mean the difference between life and death. This is a world of giant deer, of wolves lurking unseen, of wind carrying the scent of snow and danger. And this is your story, the story of a Paleolithic human living each day by the strength of your hands and the quickness of your mind. The world is still wrapped in the deep violet shadow of a dawn not yet born. The sound of the river outside flows in a steady rhythm, like an ancient song that has hummed on for thousands of years. The chill of the night clings to your skin, seeping past the thin animal hide draped over you. The faint tang of burnt wood from last night's fire lingers in your tangled hair, mingling with the rich scent of roasted deer fat. In the dim cave light, you hear the older hunters murmuring. They are speaking of the deer tracks found yesterday while foraging for roots. They had not seen the animal, but the deep imprints pressed into damp earth told them enough it was moving closer to the water source. You push yourself upright, bare feet meeting the cool-packed earth. The youngest children remain curled tightly against their mothers, while the hunters begin binding leather straps around their calves. Preparing for a long day, in the faint light, the stone tips of spears glint grey-green, like shards of a broken moon. Back then, there was no concept of time as we know it now. Life's rhythm followed the sun, the morning bird calls, the breathing of the land itself. And today, that breath feels slower, quieter than usual, a sign the forest is listening for the footsteps of hunters. No one needs to speak much. You and the others know the order of the tasks as if it were etched in your blood. One tends the main fire, drying bowstrings and warming spearheads. Another inspects the arrows sharpened the night before, fingertips brushing each edge to ensure none are dulled or chipped. In the corners, young mothers divide the dry rations, nuts, sun-dried berries, and strips of smoked meat from the previous season. These will keep the hunter's strength steady on the trail, when an empty stomach can make the feet stumble, and the arms waver at the draw of a bow. You wrap another layer of hide across your shoulders. The dawn cold seeps into bone, but you know it will be driven out once the body heats with running. Even now, you feel the worth of the hide not just as protection from the cold, but as proof of a past hunt that kept the clan alive. By the fire sits the oldest among you, his clouded eyes still sharp as striking flint. He is the keeper of memory, the one who tells of ancestors crossing rivers, tracking game, surviving winters. Before you leave the cave, he lays a rough, sun-leathered hand on your shoulder and nods. No words are needed, that nod is both trust and burden. The sun is yet to rise, but the sky is paling. You and the group step outside in silence. Spears forward, boughs slung across your backs. The earth is damp, dew clinging to each blade of grass, biting your feet with each step. The forest lies half asleep. Birdsong is sparse, leaf rustle faint, and somewhere far off, the low call of an owl threads through the stillness, a warning to other animals feeding in the dark. To you, it is a sign to pause, to listen for any strange movement. The trail to the deer's feeding grounds winds through low brush. Every step must be measured, no snapping of twigs, no sound to break the fragile quiet. You remember what the elders taught to hunt. You must walk like the wind, seeing without being seen. The deeper you go, the dimmer the light. The air smells of freshly turned soil, a sign of an animal digging for food. The lead hunter kneels, pressing a hand to the print in the mud. A large deer, that's it, with strong legs. Passed here less than an hour ago. Eyes meet across the group, and the pace quickens. Your footfalls blend with the forest's own pulse. Suddenly, a signal halt. Head toward the edge of an open meadow. You spot the flicker of ears rising above the grass. 3 adults, 1 fawn. The wind is wrong, it carries your scent toward them. If they catch it, they'll vanish in heartbeats. Quickly, the hunters split, circling wide to cut off escape. You crouch low, heart thudding, ears tuned to every rustle. Fingers grip the spear's shaft, either stone point cool against your skin. From here you can see the deer's muscles shifting beneath its brown coat, the morning light faintly glinting on its antlers. A silent hand signal just moments now. One hunter kneels, fingers pressed to the earth as if listening through them. The wind shifts slightly, barely enough to stir a blade of grass, but enough to send your scent forward. If it reaches the lead stag, the meadow will explode in flight. You force your breath through your nose, short and shallow. Your body stills like ice over a pond, only your eyes moving. The new signal split again. You and a younger hunter crawl right, slipping through a thicket of wild apple and low oak. Wet leaves brush your shins, cold as a knife. On the left, the leader and an elder advance. The gap between the two flanks forms a narrow funnel, the path the deer will instinctively take when spooked. Your hand finds the leather binding of your stone blade, hardened in fire, a quiet pact between flame and rock. Two lighter spears ride your shoulder, for throwing. Your companion carries barbed javelins meant to lodge deep and slow the prey. At your hip is a slim flint knife useful for skinning, or, when things go wrong, your gaze fixes on the lead stag thick neck, curving antlers, eyes blinking steadily as it chews. The insect chorus begins, hesitant. Sweat beads at your temple, not from heat, but from the body's sharp awareness that this is the line between hunger and plenty. A soft whistle, like wind through leaves. The hunters to your left burst from cover, feet pounding, voices sharp and quick. The stag's head jerks up, eyes wild. The herd bolts toward the narrow gap. You rise, spear levelled. In that moment, you see the waiting hands of the children in the cave, the bright eyes of elders tasting marrow fat. You push forward through the brush just as the stag charges. 7 paces. You throw the first spear. It hums low, piercing under the left shoulder, just shy of the heart. The stag bellows, stumbles, then springs forward with desperate power. You twist aside, drawing your second spear. Your companion's throw catches its flank behind the ribs. The leader's barbed spear slams into a tearing deep. The animal lurches, knees buckling. No one cheers, not while it still breathes. The stag sways at the forest edge and still dangerous. Mud and blood mingle in the air. You and the others circle, keeping distance to confuse it, a signal to move in from its blind side. You step onto soft loam, the leaf mould muffling your tread. Left hand on the spear shaft, right hand steadying. You remember the old man's words, never throw when its eyes hold your spirit. As a child, you didn't understand, now you do. Wait until it turns. It turns. You throw. The point drives through the neck, grazing the throat but severing a major vessel. Blood arcs scarlet on grey grass. The stag rears in one last, violent surge, then collapses, shuddering, still. A hand rests briefly on your shoulder, the leader's silent praise. The group bows their heads, not in prayer as later ages will know it, but in acknowledgement of the circle animal feeds human. Human tends fire. Fire returns ash to soil. Soil grows grass for more life. You draw the flint knife, edge thin as early winter ice. The first cut runs along the neck, letting blood flow free. Too much left inside will sour the meat. The elder catches some in bark, ginger to mix with fragrant herbs and fine ash, marking the children's brows with the season's hunt. Skinning the head requires skill cut along the joint so the hide stays whole. It will warm elders and clothe the young. The scent of fresh fat swells in the air, promise of warmth tonight. Memory of past hungers. You extract marrow from the leg bones, soft and rich, to eat now or save for those who cannot chew meat. The liver is cut first. Tradition gives it to the one who made the final strike to keep the eyes sharp. Warm in your hand, it tastes bitter, sweet metallic, then melts to a gentle fat. The rest is bundled for the journey home. The largest haunches go to the strongest carriers, ribs tied in bundles, the rest for boiling in stone pots. The leader places dried flowers on the bones before leaving a gesture of thanks. The sun climbs, glinting off damp blades. Insects drift lazily, newly woken. You wipe your knife on moss, it draws the blood well and keeps the blade moist. Carrying the kill is harder than finding it. The load bows your shoulders, leather straps rub your neck, sweat chills on your back, but the group's steps fall into rhythm, like a second heartbeat, dulling the ache. A bear's claw marks a tree, faded and moss-grown. The elder tastes the bark, no scent. Relief. To meet a bear with meat in hand is bad luck. Near the forest edge, the wind changes. Wolves scent dry fur, sour breath. Several of them. The group lowers the meat, spears ready. The leader sketches a half moon in the dirt, long spears forward. Light bows to the side. A grey shadow slips past. You've faced wolves before. They rarely risk a fight with prey that stands together. A short, deep growl from the leader your voices join. Rough as stones scraping stone. Silence answers. The wolves circle, then vanish. But in hunger season, they'll be back. You smile faintly, not in victory, but at the sight of the river, its light flickering like silver scales. The cave lies across the far bank. Smoke rises, a sign of the promised fire. Your steps quicken. There is a kind of pleasant weariness, smelling of fat ready to sizzle on hot stone. Before crossing the shallows, the group stops. The water is so cold it stings your bones, but you must wash away the blood scent unwanted guests follow it too easily. The elder rinses his spearhead in the current, letting it scour away the last flesh, then rests it on stone to dry in the wind. A child on the far bank dances from rock to rock, eyes bright. No shout, just a high wave, the silent sign for joy. In the cave, women pound stone, redding the flat slab for cooking. Elders stir the fire, coaxing blue smoke through the cracks like upward drifting mist. You set down the load, shoulders burning, but the smell of smoke and fat blends into calm, like a still river. You imagine ancestors watching from the rocks behind, nodding faintly. At the cave mouth, there is no applause, only the collective halt of feet, stirring a thin cloud of dust in the angled light. The oldest steps forward, places a sprig of dried herb on the deer bones you carried, and touches your knife blade a wordless blessing, and a binding to divide fairly. By the fire, 2 women grind ash with herbs into pale powder. A young mother traces a curved mark on each child's forehead today. There is meat. The first ribs hit the hot stone. Fat gathers, spits in tiny bursts the sound of plenty. The scent seeps into every crevice as to be remembered tomorrow. You sit by the entrance, back to cool stone. The carrying pole finally gone from your shoulder. The leader sits lower than the children, as always. The first share goes to the weakest, a sick child, just past fever-warm marrow from the leg bone. The second to the firekeepers, 2 old women with hair like bird nests. They break the strip of fat, eat in small bites, never looking directly at it. Then your turn. The liver slice comes, not as encouragement, but as acknowledgement. You tear a smaller piece, passing the rest to the keeper of memory. His smile creases like ancient riverbeds. Firelight shadows his hands on the wall, each finger moving like slow time. The ribs begin to loosen, sweet scent rising. Strips of meat hang above the fire, smoke cloaking them. The cave breathes together, slower now. After the first eating, silence lies down like a tame animal. The keeper pushes a log into the fire as waits for a coal to glow, then lifts it with a horn tongue onto the rim of the stone. His voice comes low, steady. Fire doesn't only eat dry grass, it eats the cold from the flesh. Stone isn't just sharp, it sharpens memory. And water. Water teaches the path. 3 seasons ago, the herd moved when the wind changed. We follow water, not the beast. Beasts follow water. Water follows stone. He speaks of old days when stone blades were thick and clumsy, when leather was not yet smoke-hardened. He learned to heat the sinew so it shrinks, stubborn as young muscle. He speaks of flint baked until its heart turns from grey to pink, then split for thin edges, sharp as first winter wind. A coal is dropped into the water skin, hissing softly. Smoke seeps into the water, winter's scent saved for spring. You drink, warmth sliding into your chest. Never let the fire sleep, unless you want your belly awake all winter, he says, smiling into the ash. A child whispers, "Will we ever go beyond this river?" The slow nod, when the stone here breaks poorly, when grass comes late, when wind keeps changing, we go and find where stone breaks well. Ancestors did not root, they staked. When the meat is ready, the keeper hands you a piece of charcoal, pointing to a faded handprint on the wall. You press your palm to the stone, cool as morning water on your heel, blow away the dust, then trace the outline in black. 3 angled marks for the spears thrown today, a dot for the liver, a curve for the carrying pole. The woman presses her child's tiny hand to the wall, dusted in pale ash. The print appears faint and white, like cloud shadow on a mountain slope. No one explains the marks. Those who come later will understand with their own hunger, their own lungs. Night falls like a hide pulled over the sky. The wind changes, bringing sap and moss scents. Firekeepers ring the coals with stones to hold heat through the dark. Smoke works its way into the hides, making them smell of home. You lie down, back to the worn hide, head on the leather strap that burned your shoulders today. Beside you, the child sleeps, the curved ash mark still on its brow. Farther off, the keeper coughs once, then is silent. The fire crackles like early winter rain on dry leaves. You pull the hide to your chest, breathing deep smoke in your hair, fat on your hands, cold held at the cave's mouth. You think of the water paths he spoke of seasons to come, of mornings when the mist will find your nose and the wind will shift just enough to guide without telling. You ask for nothing, only take your place in the circle: earth, grass, animal, fire, human, ash, earth. Outside, the river runs like dark light under the sky. On the wall, your new handprint cools, merging with the old into a cluster of unfallen stars. Your eyes grow heavy as stone, your breath falling into the shared rhythm of the cave. Sleep comes without sound, like deer crossing grass, leaving only a trace of mist. Before the fire shrinks to red eyes, you hear a voice from far ago, perhaps the fire, perhaps the ash, perhaps the bones. Tomorrow, if the wind shifts, we shift our steps. If the water bends, we bend with it. If the stone cracks, we change the break. Bellies don't argue with fire. Fire doesn't argue with night. Only the hand remembers the way. You smile in sleep seen by no one, meant for no one except those who will wake with you another morning, by the same river, the same rocks, the same smoke, the same water, and the same law of fire kept since the first hand marked the wall. Outside, the sky thickens to wet velvet. The river's sound fades into a soft backdrop, like something you still hear with closed eyes. The fire's heart has shrunk to a ring of embers, each glowing like a half-lidded eye. The keeper turns, hide slipping from his shoulders, showing a back crisscrossed with scars. He lays one last stick on the embers, not for light, but to keep the fire breathing until dawn. His hand pauses on the wood, as if sending it a message no one else will hear. Movement slow in the cave. A mother draws her child close, their breath sinking. A young man drapes an arm across you, keeping you in the circle. The smoke is softer now, mingled with the damp earth in the stone, with the day-warmed hides. On the wall, the handprints yours, the child's. Those of the gone sink into shadow, but when your eyes adjust, they bloom again, like cold stars in a different sky. You know that seasons from now, another hand will fit over yours, drawing a new outline. You'll be only part of the rock then, but the night's warmth will remain, like smoke in hide. The keeper once said, "Stone does not forget." It holds shapes, marks, and the echo of footsteps in the earth. Even under wind and rain, it remembers where fire burned, where fat splattered, where humans slept against it. You curl into yourself, hide, pull close, letting the warmth from the person beside you seep into bone. The fire ticks softly, like a knuckle tapping on a story not yet finished. Your breath slows, eyelids sink, and the day's images river light. Deer, shattering stone melt into soft strands of dream. Outside, the river carries back the small lights of the sky. Inside, the circle of humans and fire stays unbroken, as it has for thousands of years, and will remain until the wind changes. You drift down, without start or end, as if floating in a boat of smoke, moving along the river of past hunts, toward another dawn. Tonight closes not with a promise, but with a shared breath. Every hand pressed to the wall, every eye turned to the fire, knows that tomorrow will bring another path, another mark, and someone to keep the memory for those not yet living it. And you, who have lived your first day within the circle, are now part of the story, a story told not in words, but in smoke, in handprints, and in seasons where the fire never sleeps. You wake as wind slips through a crack in the hides and brushes cold against the tips of your ears. Outside, thin mist drapes the riverbank in a white band. as though the water has exhaled in its sleep. Inside the cave, the fire still holds a few red coals, enough to reveal the hunched silhouette of the bone needle seamstress, legs tucked, back slightly bent, her needle passing in and out in the quiet rhythm of a soft, private song. You sit up, the scent of smoke in your clothes warming your throat. Without looking up, the seamstress nods toward you, her chin tipping faintly at the finished hood nearby. Deer hide, smoked and softened with fat, fur side out, skin side in. The seam is overlapped, one edge lying over the other, stitched with sinew smoked until it shrinks, sealing out the wind. At the back of the hood, she has pierced small holes, threading sinew into a drawstring when wind shifts and snow cuts across your face. A single pull will draw it close against your cheeks. She places the bone needle in your hand, light yet strong, its tip polished smooth by many seasons. "Hide speaks only to the needle," she murmurs, voice like cooled ash. The wind listens only to the seam. You nod. The garment hugs your shoulders and chest, the seam blocking drafts along your collarbone. The cuffs are edged with fur to keep wrists warm. Shoes of hide are lined with fluffed, dried grass. When you walk, your heels make no sound. At the cave mouth, the leader plants a thin reed into the ground to read the wind, a tuft of foxtail tied at the top. The tuft leans just enough to hint at the direction the deer herd will turn when they hear human voices. He stares at the low sky, then signals for silence. You understand today is the Great Hunt, a drive into a natural bottleneck mapped by the elders 3 seasons ago. From the back of the cave, the Keeper of Memory hands you a pinch of ash mixed with fat. You smear it over your nose bridge and jawline, locking in your scent. The ash's warmth feels like a fire's gentle palm on your face. The path to the hunting grounds is cold but dry. A thin crust of ice stretched between blades of grass, breaking softly under each step. You walk beside the young companion, swift and fearless with a throwing spear, his barbed shaft slung across his back like a long bone. At the meadow's edge, the land narrows between 2 ridges of jagged rock, a natural bottleneck. To the left, thorn scrub. To the right, a slick slope of ice into a shallow pit. If the herd is driven from afar, they'll avoid the voices and veer toward the neck, where spear points wait like a row of wind stakes. The group fans out to scout. The leader uses his staff to mark small points in the earth, the calling post, the intercept, the crossing path. 2 elders gather dry branches, laying them in a shallow line heavy with unfamiliar scent, just enough to make the deer shy away. They plant sticks upright here and there, leaves tied to their tops, a temporary wind fence, not strong ridders, but enough to whisper to the animals. Don't pass here. You, the young companion, and a firekeeper are assigned to the cut-off team if the herd turns the wrong way. You will appear in their blind spot, pushing them back toward the bottleneck. The Keeper of Memory brings up the rear, moving slowly, reading the wind. He carries a bundle of sagebrush at his hip, brushing it lightly to keep the air scented evenly. Before taking positions, the leader lifts a handful of earth to his nose. The smell is damp moss mixed with cold soil. He lowers his hand and signals good. You all re-smear the ash-fat mixture on your faces, pull hoods down over your ears. Words now give way to hand signs: open palm drive, fist hold, 2 fingers slicing change angle, 4-finger to lips, silence. These signals have been practiced through the storm season. No one needs to ask twice. Below, the river hides its dark surface beneath the mist. You see the drinking spot where the deer often come, a bare patch free of ice, pressed with countless hoofprints. Today the wind carries human scent away from it. The drive path lies as straight as a seam stitched across a shoulder. The start signal is the soft tap of stone against a tree, a deep note that travels far. On the left flank, the calling team begins, their voices even like strong wind, not breaking into shouts. The deer lift their heads, ears erect, jaws mid-chew. The layer of ash on your face itches faintly. You breathe through your nose, short and controlled. The herd begins to drift. 2 at the front edge right, 3 behind follow. Ice glazes the ground near the shallow pit, treacherous if they run in panic. Your cut-off team waits 10 counts, then reveals yourselves at the edge of the brush, not shouting, just stepping into sight. Your movement enough to catch the lead stag's eye. It changes course again exactly toward the line the leader drew in the dirt this morning. The voices on the right flank shift lower like a wall of wind pressing them toward the neck. You hear the young companion's breath behind you, even and light. Crumbs of frost kick up under the leather soles, falling soundless. The wind fence leaves shiver midway up, giving the illusion of water's surface something deer naturally avoid. Two in the middle suddenly veer left a bad sign if they cross the scent line. The rest could break formation. You angle in early, stepping slow to bend their path, the companion looping in a half circle behind. A short, breathy car escapes your throat, not a word, just a pulse of air to their ears. It works. They fold back into the drift. At the next mouth, the leader crouches like a wind stake, barbed spear lowered to knee height. The rock walls bounce the voices into a flat sheet of sound. The herd flows in like a river of flesh. 10 paces between the lead stag and the spear point. 3 hand signal, 2 fingers folding halfway. 1, you raise your spear. Held at chest height, tip angled slightly down so it won't deflect on bone. The stag surges forward under the herd's momentum. 4 hooves tearing icy turf into white spray. The leader bends his knees another notch, shoulders lowering like a rooted post. The moment the stag shifts weight, he throws a short hiss, the barbed head driving into the forward shoulder. The deep, heavy thud of wood into flesh, the barbs locking to break its stride. You waste no time. Stepping left to absorb the momentum, your lighter spear slides low, skimming under the third rib, slicing the large vessel just below the neck. The stag rears high, a body silvered by shattered ice, then tips right, folding its legs. The herd behind funnels left, their path aligning with the trembling leaves just as planned. On the right flank, the young companion swings in a half arc, his second spear lodging in the third deer's side, slowing it sharply. The calling team's voices soften, not breaking into panic, not driving the herd wild. The last 2 leapt together, skimming the ice at the pit's edge, one slipping slightly and then finding its balance. The leader signals release enough, 1 kill to your 1 hold, never take all when the season is long. The lead stag grinds out a hoarse bellow, steam rising white from its open mouth. You approach from its blind side. Flint knife slipping cleanly into the throat seem quick, so it doesn't linger. Its body trembles 3 times, then stills. No cheers, no pats on the back, only the cold smoke of breath fading into the wind. Season law says warm blood must be drained before the wind seals it. You cut along the chest, opening the cavity to release heat. The viscera comes out, the liver set on a leaf, a small piece for the finisher. The rest for the young and the weak. Fat around the wound edge begins to congeal, thin and glossy as ice on a shallow pool. You hear footsteps in the thorn brush, the place and lift tread of wolves. No rush. The leader carves a half circle with his boot heel, and the half-moon formation falls in by instinct long spear's front. Light bows angled for a shot. He rumbles from the pit of his throat, the others joining 1 tone lower, building a wall of sound. The brush stills. The wolves circle, unwilling to trade blood for wood and stone today. You hold for 10 more counts, then lower your shoulders. Field dressing begins here. The hide is pulled from chest to back, joint opened with a thin blade. Marrow from the leg bones is packed separately. Bones are stacked neatly beside the sagebrush, where the keeper of memory lays a sprig on top, a thank you spoken in scent. Winter grants you mercy. Sliding meat on the hide is easier than carrying it on your back. The freshly skinned deer hide is laid fur down, meat placed on top, lashed with sinew. The front edge dragged by 2 people. You carry the ribs and hind legs on a shoulder pole, the wood biting a hot mark into your skin. The rotation rule runs itself 10 long counts before swapping. Those tired drop to the rear and count by breath, not voice. The walk back is quiet as snowfall beyond night. The hide sled's hiss is steady enough to lull. Thin ice cracks faintly at oak roots, not enough to break. At the riverbank, wind whips the scent of cold water, stripping away the last traces of fat from your hood. The cold water right hands plunged in, fingers squeezed hard, red tendrils swirling away like cloud. Spearheads are rinsed in the current, set on rock for the wind to dry. Water bites to the bone, sharp but bracing. The young companion dips his wrists, inhales deeply, smiling without sound. The leader points across to the opposite bank, where the cave's thin smoke rises straight wind, carrying the fire sent nowhere into the forest today. Crossing the shallows, a child stands on the familiar rock, hand raised high. Silent wave. Silent joy is remembered without words. Winter sun sits low, tinged blue, painting a thin line on each spear blade. The cave opens into warmth, solid as a shoulder. The flat stone is already hot enough to draw fat the instant meat touches it. The firekeeper shakes off ash, drops a live coal into the heart, blowing gently through a reed tube. Strips of meat are stretched taut with sinew and hung in blue smoke to drink in winter's flavour, so that on the coldest day, fat will wake with just a little heat. Portions follow the fire's law, with some widening. The weakest eat first, the firekeepers next. The drivers take the edge fat. The finisher shares liver with the keeper of memory. The leader still sits lower than the children, his hand steadying a leaf bowl as the sick child fumbles, not a drop spilling. Stone drum begins with a pebble tapped on a wall slab, hollow, warm sound. 2 people take cleaned ribs, tapping them on the flat stone in the rhythm of breath, 2 short, 1 long, slow repeat. Steps circle the fire, hood shadowing faces, soft leather heels making no tremor on the stone. Not to stir a frenzy, but to remember the morning's drift, the wind's turn, the river lying under mist. The song of the river path starts without words, long nose breaths, low notes like wind threading through grass. Then words catch are like fire to tinder water walks before the feet, wind before the eyes. Stone teaches the breaking way, leaf the way to avoid. Belly remembers fire. Fire remembers night. Night remembers the hand. You walk in step, shoulders loose, back straight as a stake. The young companion brushes fingers against the carrying pole leaning on the wall, the weight lifted from you this afternoon. The seamstress sits by the fire, bone needle resting by her knee, eyes half closed as if hearing old stitches in a new song. The children have their own lesson sinew lines. A hind leg is placed on the stone, adults pointing out each tendon heel, ham, outer line which binds a spear, which draws a hood, which wraps a knife handle. One child is given the cut, the thin blade trembles once in the small hand, then runs smooth. The keeper cups hot dripping fat, brushing a thin line on the child's crown, smiling toothless for the head to remember. On the flat stone his meat murmurs, the sweet scent of fat wraps the smoke in a low blanket along the ground. Outside, fine snow begins to fall sparse as it rests in a song. You lift a small piece of marrow to your tongue, letting it dissolve slowly. The cave breathes as one bellies calm, shoulders light, eyes soft. The feast doesn't flare, it settles fitting for winter. When all are full, the stone drum softens, the steps gather tighter around the fire. The leader takes the cleaned skull, handing it to the keeper. He builds a small frame at the cave mouth from crossed oak branches, hanging the ribs in a thin ring not for display. But to tell wind and season we give thanks. We remember the path. He sits close to the fire, coughs softly and then speaks. My first great hunt had no neck as wide as today's. The wind turned 3 times, the herd broke twice, a spear snapped. I stood in the wrong place. A deer struck my thigh, the scars still there. My teacher did not scold. He laid his hand on the stone and said, "Stone breaks well when hot enough. So do you." Since then I've heated stone longer and smoked sinew more, moved slower yet arrived truer. You look at the scar running neat as the overlapped seam on your hood from this morning. Outside, the skull stands pale in mist, ribs trembling lightly in the breeze. They are not frightening, they hold memory. The fire curls down to a ring of embers. The firekeeper lays one more stick so it will breathe until dawn. You pull your hood low. Rest your head on the smoked sinew coil. The scent of fat and pine resin weaves through the air like the thinnest wool. The river's voice lies outside, low as the earth's pulse. Inside, the circle draws closer to the fire. You let each muscle fall into the quiet. Morning's images reduced to fine lines, tied leaves, wind stakes, a seam across the shoulder. Sleep comes like fine snow, silent, unhurried, thick enough to soften the day's sharp edges. Before your eyes fully close, you hear again a familiar winter line one the fire seems to like in this season tomorrow. If the wind shifts, we shift our steps. If the water bends, and we bend with it. The hand has remembered the way, and so the night fastens gently, like the bone needle slipping through the last hole of a seam, drawing the hood shut. You sleep not falling, not drifting, but lying still in the circle earth. Grass, animal, fire, human, ash, earth. You wake earlier than the fire. The wind at the edge of the hide roof speaks differently today, not slicing across your shoulders like a cold blade, but stroking lightly like a long-forgotten dry hand, remembering its touch. On the river's rim, the ice makes a new kind of sound, not the sharp crack, but a thin tick, a sign it's loosening. On the water's surface, as the black seam has widened by half a hand since yesterday. A small waterbird beats its wings at the ice's lip and calls softly, its voice thin as ash splinters. Inside the shelter, the embers are still hot. The fire tender brings a reed tube close to the coals and blows very gently, like a long sigh. The memory keeper sits angled beside the flicker of indistinct light, knees under a hide, eyes looking out toward the early rising water road. He sets a bundle of dried musk on your palm without speaking, then turns his other hand up and draws a line from the riverbank toward the ridge, the water road that will draw the group for the next few days. Out on the bar, the leader turns the reed stalk. With the tied foxtail tuft, the tuft jerks less. The smell of damp moss is stronger. On the far hillside, a new, silver streak shows snow retreating into a thin rill, spilling down through the reed beds. In your head, a route appears like a seam on a collar, the first stitch starting from this bank, over a few jutting rocks, looping behind a grass flat, skirting a waking bog, then hugging the lip of earth to a greener watering place. The bone needle seamstress quietly hands you new gloves for out. Leather inside, hugging your fingers. "The ice will bite less today," she murmurs, eyes still following the needles in and out on someone's cuff. Her overlapped seam runs like wind, not fast. On the beat. The decision to leave the old camp doesn't need to be said. The fire is fed one stick and then spared, so as not to waste. Smoked meat enough for 2 suns. Last night's handprint on the rock wall has faded with smoke. They'll stay behind as a message. To sky horses and any other hands that pass. This landing gave us a season. Now we give it back to the wind. You kneel by the fire and pass your hands through the ring of warmth without touching the flame, just letting your skin drink a small breath. The memory keeper drops a coal into a hide tray of water. A thin hiss dissolves into the air like a falling bird drop of sound. "Carry the home fire's scent with us," he says, "so the new camp will know who we are." There aren't many belonging, but each has its place. The sleeping hide folds in thirds, bound with smoke-cured sinew. That coil goes in its own pouch so it won't take the smell of fat. The bone needle is tucked into the seamstress's hairbun, worn like a prized tooth. The barbed spear gets a fresh seat of warmed pitch pine resin mixed with ochre, laid thin over the join between stone head and shaft. The binding is drawn tight. The tip wiped down the length with dry grass so when you signal, the gleam won't catch a deer's eye. The yoke carries smoked ribs and a bundle of fat for the road. Your hide pack takes the heaviest heat-treated flint, a pouch of thick pine resin and some ochre, a few antler wedges, and 2 thin blades still on the nodule to snap off fresh edges along the way. The young mother slings the baby with a chest wrap. Her back supported by a soft hide, the rhythm of her steps matches its breath. Quiet as fire breathing into ash. Loads are shared by roll. Not only by strength, the fire tender bears the heaviest live coals, dry grass, reed tube. The leader lighter hands, free to point the way, to sign. The memory keeper carries only the smoke water gourd and the musk, but in his head he bears the river windstone map of many seasons. Before setting out, the leader lays 3 small stones into an arrow pointing north. The sign, "Follow the water." The memory keeper smears a thin streak of ochre on the rock's edge and whispers without words. The child with the crescent ash mark on its brow presses its palm to the wall one more time. The small print gleams under the low light like a fish, changing direction in dark water. You look back once last season's deer skull still hangs on the twig frame by the cave mouth, the ribs clinking very softly in the wind, not like a bell, or like a finger plucking a quiet sinew. No one says goodbye. The cave will stay. The wind will keep it. The stone will remember. The first step out of the known is always heavier than the ones that follow, like the first stitch that's hard to draw through 2 layers of hide. The leader goes first. Reed gauge tilted just enough to read the wind. The left wing of the team hugs the high bank to avoid the bog. The right wing keeps clear of reed beds soaked with water. Your eyes sweep the ground, old hoof prints faded, heel edges eaten by water the herd moved last night or the one before. The sky opens a pale patch between clouds. The fire tender pauses half a beat, sets the live coal bag on the grass, checks the heat with the back of her hand, then lifts it at once. Don't let the warmth fall. You switch the yoke with a move drilled across seasons, the bar from left shoulder forward, tipping to the right, the strap sliding along your collarbone like a tamed snake. At a rock that juts out into the river, the leader signals halt. Here the water opens like a tongue, a rill from the hill above pours down, glinting. You're on your knees when the smell of the water changes less tang. More moss, a sign it ran long over stone before joining the river. The memory keeper sits beside you, dips a finger. and draws a gentle curve on the ground. The next leg will follow the rill to a hollow between two knolls, earth soft but not swallowing. In the oak wood, a woodpecker bangs 2 beats break 1. The young mother whispers, "It's back." That bird's voice tells the measure of wind and grubs. Small signals come and go through the group's ears as lightly as smoke. Near the lip of earth, the young hunter signs below, there's a waking patch of muck, the mud face pocking with bubbles. The team goes around, not straight through. Someone cuts thin branches to lay a path in case you must return this way by evening. The leader, quiet, leaves a handful of shredded grass on a windstake, a sign for yourselves if the sky turns in a few hours. When the sun climbs another handspan, a clearing opens between the 2 knolls ground, firm enough to set a load, wind running even. 10 long breaths of rest. Taking turns. You drop your shoulders. The yoke leaves the hurt spot with a hot stripe. The seamstress sips water and checks your coat seam again. The overlapped line still hugs. She lets slip a small stitch of a smile. This seam will hold 2 more suns. Near noon, the wind shifts half a step and the forest smell changes. The memory keeper signals to slow. Ahead on the bank, a circle of stones blackened with soot and old hearth. The ash has been dragged by rain. A tiny coal intact under the rim. Not from this season, but not long enough for ash to turn soil. Beside it, a strange broken flint, the break nearly flat. The face dull, as if it was heated and cooled too fast, not the way your group tempers stone coaxed to red at the heart. Then pulled into ash to cool slowly. The leader signals to stay outside the ring. Don't step into another's hearth, that's the law. The young mother pinches a bit of musk, sets it on a small rock, and blows once. The scent rides low, then thins a wordless greeting to the other footsteps that slept here. You lift the shard with the edge of your glove, a thin dorsal ridge runs the back, showing a napper who favours long pressure flakes over percussion, another habit. The old blade is thin too, but the edge isn't as even as when you strop yours with damp leather. The memory keeper nods. The stone teaches that hands are not the same. We keep on with the water, don't steal someone else's wind. A stretch later and you see very old tracks on mud that dry to scales and then wet again, broken scratches like unfinished signs. You don't know who they were, you don't need to. Forest law pass through, leave a scented greeting, don't contest. You snug the pack straps and keep your breath steady like last night's stone drum. The rill is heard before it's seen water running hidden under a thin skin of ice. A sound between a rasp and a whisper, as if the water were speaking softly to the earth about a matter only the 2 of them know. The rill isn't wide, but the mossy banks are slick, the kind of slick that waits for a stranger's heel. The leader plants his spear at the ice's lip and presses lightly with his shoulder. The ice dents into a white mark, then eases. It doesn't break. He signs a diagonal over the protruding stones like the spine of some animal fallen asleep. The fire tender hands you a probing staff, a peeled young oak bough, blunt-tipped, half a hand taller than you. Coldwater loves to take a finger first. She smiles. Don't give it one. You set the tip to each spot you mean to place a foot. Listening to the sound below, honeycombed shell sings differently than solid ice. Tiny grains of cold prickle your nape. Not from wind, but from the water's smell rising faint metal. Flavourless, but clean. Like a whisper fresh from washing. The young hunter moves on your left, holding a loose sinew around your waist not to pull you back. Only enough for a hand to remind you you're not alone. The young mother tightens the baby's sling and shifts her pack to her strong side. The memory keeper stands quartering the wind, watching the surface. He pulls a pebble the size of a bird's egg from his pouch and tosses it lightly into the centre. A thin tick, a blade crack, then silence. Diagonal's correct. You set your first foot on a jutting stone. The leather grips the grit, holding better than wet mud. The probe finds the second stone. The sinew at your back draws 1 hair's breadth, like a hand resting on your shoulder. You breathe through your nose in short strokes. The wind can't find its way into your chest. Below, the water throws white flecks against the ice ceiling, which vanish the instant they touch air-living flowers that haven't time to bloom. Midstream, the third stone is slicker than you thought. Your toe slides half a nail, the ankle rasps. You drop the staff fast, take the load in your shoulder, press the tip onto the ice beside you. A hairline fracture runs, but holds. The young hunter tightens the sinew, the faintest bit reminding you. I'm here. You change the angle of your toes. Find friction again. Shift your weight into the far thigh. Your heartbeat leaves your ears and returns to your chest. One more move and you're on the bank. The others cross cleanly. The fire tender keeps the live coal bag dry. She sets it on wet grass, flips it once, and the smoke lifts so little it's like a dream breathing. The leader cocks an ear toward the reeds, nothing but water. He touches your forehead very lightly, a contact thin as an ash streak. Perhaps that's how he names the day you crossed the rill without letting the water know your toes. The new camp sits on a rise 2 body heights above the river, back to a sparse oak stand, face to the water. The surface soil is dry and thin, giving just enough underfoot for toes to remember. The wind goes from your back to the river, good human scent will flow waterward, not into the woods. The leader points to 2 trunks about a yoke and a half apart posts for the main roof. You and the young hunter drive in bone-shaped pegs, lash the hide edge with sinew. The seamstress threads through old seams and reinforces at corners where the wind likes to tug. The first roof is a windbreak, the height to shoulder height, pitched just so, the lower edge weighted with flat stones. Inside, a layer of dry grass and fir boughs' soft needles that don't prickle skin makes a bed that inhales without pulling the cold uphill. The hearth sits 1 pace outside the roof, far enough that smoke won't eat into the hide, close enough that warmth will cradle your head. Lighting the home fire, the fire tender opens the live coal pouch, lifts 1 glowing ember into a nest of beaten dry grass. She blows through the reed, her breath like a thread passing a bone needle's eye. The first smoke is fine as spider silk. Flame takes the heart of the grass, climbs 2 finger widths, and stands very gentle. The memory keeper sprinkles a little ochre around the rim not to make it burn hotter, but to name the scent of the home fire. The ochre's note blends faintly with pine pitch from the tools, a resinous, supple, warm smell that recalls a low song from the nights in the old cave. Drinking water is dipped from the rill up the slope where it runs fast, carrying little mud. You boil with stones, drop 2 red-hot pebbles fresh from the coals into the water bag. The water trembles. The scum of fat flecks on top melts. Away a warm tonic for the child who's coughed all morning. Smoked ribs hang in the oak smoke. Fat ticks down onto the coals, sounding like worm rain. The young mother tears thin strips of hide for cordage, braids 3 loosely into a loop to hang on the wall. The young hunter drives 3 stakes to rig a drying rack for sinew. He ties the ends far from the fire so the sinew dries slowly and won't crack. You walk down to the water and look for a few round stones the size of your palm, the kind that won't explode when you drop them in water. The leader goes alongside, his heels making no sound, eyes counting bird tracks on the mud, 2 fresh parallel marks, likely a drink this morning. He scans the reeds, lips shaping a silent line, probably asking the wind which coat it will wear tonight. By evening, the second roof is up for the 2 elders and the little ones. You pin the hide edge tight to the ground, leave a finger's width slit for breath to find its way out in sleep. The oak leans against the oak trunk at a shiny notch polished by many seasons. The new camp looks like a sentence still being written. The fire is the first letter, the roof a diacritic, the drying rack a semicolon. A thin stripe of gold slips through the leaves. The leader gathers everyone by the fire. The memory keeper brings a warm hide tray of water, sprinkles in a pinch of ochre, and stirs with the wind. The water blushes lightly like the sky when winter draws back. He hands the tray to the leader. The leader dips a fingertip and draws a fine line across a flat stone by the hearth. That line runs from one edge to the other, light as a rill. From now on, this landing is called Red Tongue. The memory keeper says just loud enough for the fire to hear, because the water opens here like a tongue, and the home fire has drunk the colour of ochre. 3 stones are set into an arrow pointing toward the river, the group's old sign, follow water, eat with the wind. The seamstress taps the arrow point stone once with her bone needle, not like a bell, but like naming the place so the earth can hear. Your task is to brush a thin smear of pitch-melted pine resin along the lower edge of the windbreak so the scent locks the camp's wind corner, and slant rain won't wick through the hem. The young mother buries a pinch of last season's dried sweet leaves shallow under the oak in front of the roof, a thank you in scent offered to the earth-forgiving rest, as the smells of ochre and resinous pitch wrap the smoke. The memory keeper tells a story of water running upstream once. Winter held the river too long. Downstream, ice locked the mouths of fish. Up above, the rill still whispered. I went against the flow, following the sound of water back to its source. I found a stone hearth like this one, ash still warm. No people in sight. I laid 3 stones pointing the other way so they'd know the road I'd taken. 2 days later the wind turned, and they followed my arrow to the same camp. I didn't ask their names or their season. I shared liver and fat that night. No one thirsted. You think of the old hearth from morning, of the shard broken flat not like your hand would make. One day, perhaps, your 3-stone arrow will point them here, or theirs will point you somewhere else. The wind carries the unsaid lines through the reeds, put the right scents and signs in place, and the whole forest will understand. When the home fire stands steady and the ochre's smell is mingled with the smoke, the leader nods time for stone. You dig a shallow pit by the hearth and line its belly with pebbles. You set fist-sized chert nodules in a ring. Not into the heart of the fire, let the heat seep in slowly so their faces change colour like a dawn band from grey to rosy brown to faintly lustrous. The memory keeper kneels on his heels, reading the stone's colour not by names but as a tale when it's drunk enough breath. The surface will exhale, don't hurry. Draw it out and let it cool slowly under ash. He teases each piece to the rim with a stick and tucks them under a warm blanket of ash. You take a core, a hard chunk that fills the hand, and you rough face set a chert flake on your thigh at the angle you were taught. One press, one pull, the fracture runs deep, and the flake comes off like a dry leaf, leaving the petiole, leaving an edge sharp enough to cut sinew without biting your fingers. You strop the edge twice on damp leather and stop before the stone tires. Last season's lesson moves in your hands sharp for doing, not for showing. The young hunter tests a cut on a new dried sinew, the edge glides. The sinew answers with the faintest squeak, like rain pinched between fingers. The seamstress nods and hands the bone needle to the oldest child, push and draw, with breath, not with eyes. Eyes watch the line, breath pulls the needle. The child inhales just enough, breathes evenly. The needle slips in and out like a small fish in an unbroken current. When there are enough fresh blades in the box, the leader goes with you to the water. He points out the streaks on the river's surface that look like hand marks brushed against a hide stone lies close, and the wind gets shoved back. Here, at night, with torches, move slowly through this stretch. A patch of water suddenly turns smooth in the wind where the water drops out. The depth changes. Wash scent at the rill's bank, not in the hollow. You hear the river read you a wordless map. Furrows are different from ripples. The water's colour is different with the wind smell. The lesson ends with a mouthful of warm water held in the mouth slowly so your head will remember the sweet places and the cold. Evening thins and night rises like a hide with a very neat top stitch. Before the shadow reaches the hearth's edge, the leader divides the watch 3 vigils. First the young hunter and you, middle the fire tender and the young mother, last the leader and the memory keeper. The 2 elders sleep a whole night, saving breath for the day ahead. The children's lesson starts with fire. The fire tender hands the reed tube to the older child, blow from the belly. Don't fan with your hand. Watch the smoke, greenish as grass, dense as wood. Smoke with motes is fat, keep that a little farther from the flame. The small one grips the tube. Face solemn though the cheeks are round. The breath goes right. The flame rises a notch without lunging. The seamstress teaches the keep sleep knot, one loop, one turn, one lock, so when the baby shifts, the sling won't choke the mother's neck. You feed a dry stick into the fire ring the way you set a chopstick into water. Don't jab, don't churn. The memory keeper stands at the rim and listens to the forest. He says, on the first night in a new camp, the forest talks a lot. Hear the true sounds leaves, water, stone. Hear the false sounds a belly that's missing the old camp. You set a duty calendar in your head. First watch tend the fire, second watch trim the roof to the wind, last watch read the dew. The older child gets a small task count, the night beats of the woodpecker if it shifts trees. A change in the number can mean a creature crossing, close to the forest's edge, inside the fire circle. The leader sets 3 tasks for tomorrow. Raise a strip of wind blinds along the rabbit run, just enough for small game so the camp hears us eat. Lightly first, set a woven branch weir at the rill's mouth to trap fish overnight. Put a skjor. Teach the little one the water step to walk without waking the surface. The little voices in the forest settle. The fire tender marks her watch with a very faint resin scent. She warms a stick in pitch and draws an invisible line on the windstake, so the night remembers us. She smiles very softly. At first light, the water's colour shifts by a hair enough to tell the river has fallen a notch. The young hunter scouts the reed edge and reads the rabbit paths with eyes and hands where fur grazes grass, where the ground spring changes. You braid a cord from sinew and soft inner bark. Make small nooses to hang at a rabbit's head height. The locking knot is last night's knot, tweaked so when it tightens it won't cut too deep into flesh. The water trap needs everyone. The leader picks the narrowest mouth of the rill, where rock shoulders jut like 2 arms. You and the young hunter weave branches and grasses into a coarse comb. Set it on the bias to let water pass and catch fish. Don't seal it tight enough to eat. Not enough to drain the rill. The young mother drops a few stones as anchors and leaves a gap for small fish what the elders taught eat, and let the water keep going. By midday, the windblinds give up a young rabbit. The quick ending was set beforehand. One hand holds, one hand bends, one breath, so the animal doesn't fear long. You smear a streak of fat on its brow and lay its head facing the river, a habit from an older teacher returned sent to water. By evening, the weir yields 4 wrist-thick fish, fins black-green, belly silver. The fire tender doesn't cheer. She gives a single nod, as if thanking the old hearth for the lesson. The fish are tapped behind the head. The blood is let onto the ground. The earth drinks some, the river the rest. You skin them with a newly stropped chert edge. The bones are stacked neatly to roast later for the child's calcium. The meal carries no heavy scent, fish grilled over a low fire, rabbit fat brushed along the edges, a pinch of sour leaves warmed till they crisp. The seamstress mixes a little fine ash with pitch and smears a thin line along the roof edge to guard against slant rain if the wind turns overnight. The warm pitch scent moves slowly. Doesn't trample the smell of fish. You remember to cock the hearth a little across the wind, so the smoke leans riverward and the night won't hold a heavy smell. Before the meal, the leader lifts a slice of liver between 2 fingers as if lifting a lettered stone. He sets a small piece on the fire, not in the heart, but at the hot rim. The hiss is very soft, like tapping a grain of sand on a shell. The smell rises, not begging, not bragging, only reminding that meat comes by trade with forest and water. The memory keeper draws a stroke of ochre along the backbone of the first fish and sets the bones in the direction of the current. He says, "Lay bones the right way and the night lies easy." The young mother paints a thin line of fat on the child's brow shorter than half a finger. The child falls asleep on her shoulder, breath moving out evenly. You give the first bites to the elders and keep the belly for the child tomorrow morning. There's no salt on the fish, but rabbit fat keeps warmth in the body. The young hunter licks a fingertip once and smiles without a sound. The leader glances nigh with the smell of a grin. After the meal, the bones are set back into the fire to crack once so night creatures won't mistake them for food. You rake ash over half the coals. Leave the other half glowing to let the fire sleep without dying. The fire tender adds a pinch of sweet grass at the edge, not for scent's sake, but so the fire will have a small song to listen to at night. The next morning, your lesson with the older child is walk without waking the water. The leader chooses a shallow stretch. Water at a steady pace, stones smooth. He ties a fine sinew around your ankle, the other end to a stake on the bank. As you move, the line speaks about rhythm and pressure. Short steps. Set the outer edge of the foot first. Let the water slide off both sides. Don't stomp straight down. Don't churn. Breath through the nose, shoulders loose. The child looks at the surface and sees its reflection unbroken. A bright dot in the eyes. The memory keeper stands on the bank and reads your path not by sightline, but by smell when the water wakes. It speaks a very thin stripe of moss, and the wind carries that stripe into the grass. The lesson ends with the seamstress's game. She stands on the bank and lets a filament of inner bark drift on the water. You walk past the thread. It doesn't sway. You pass. The child walks too, and it sways once. The leader laughs. Tomorrow we'll wash the scent at a different stretch. Second evening at the camp. The wind tilts half a step, enough to dapple the roof's windward edge with rain. You and the seamstress go to the lip, change the peg angle, and seal the hem with a fresh line of pitch resin simmered on hot stones. Mixed with fine ochre and a little ash, the smear thin and wandering like a tiny stream across the hide. The pitch smells warm and mild, threaded through with wood smoke. You watch the pitch draw tight as it cools, clinging to the fibres like a promise of closure. The seamstress flicks the bone needle once along the edge, an extra touch so it won't tear when you open it next season. She doesn't speak about rain. She says, "Don't let anything run straight through you without going around wind or water." Thoughts as well. You hold to the words the way the pitch holds when thoughts of the old hearth creep up. Let them bend a little and slide back over the river. The new camp needs your breath full today. Not wishes for return. Second night. The sky's clearer and colder. The bright band above the water road of night birds stretches across the oak's crown. The memory keeper says, "When that band stands by this treetop, the river will drop another step in 2 nights." You believe him, not because he gives you word, but because last night he was right. The leader gives you a small task of the sky each watch. Step out to the oak, point your index finger along the bright band, and note where it sits against the roof's point. In the morning, draw a small mark on the stone with ochre. A chain of signs will tell your head a story when you leave this landing, sentences your mouth can't tell. You do it, and your head quiets. The wind brushing the roof sounds like a finger on a string, a note already known. The fire runs leaner, burns lighter, smoke rises straight a stretch, then bends toward the river. On the third morning, the leader decides move on. The new camp has been named Fed Lightly. Slept in for 2 nights. Time to give the ground back as we found it. You and the young hunter strike the roof. Warm the dew-bitten spots. Fold it. The seamstress lifts the extra pitch from the hem. Keeps a small piece in her pouch to seal a tear on the trail if needed. The fire tender mounds the ash into a low cairn. Sets 3 round stones atop it with the water's direction a silent arrow. The memory keeper draws a thin ochre line beside the mound, not pointing to shore but out to mid-river, where you learned to read the waves. He whispers without words, not for anyone else to hear, but so his own head will have a said sentence. You place a thin shard of bottle glass on the arrow stone, just as he told you last night, so if another hand passes, they'll know this hand sat here. The young mother tucks the last pinch of sweet leaves into a crack, and weighs it with a chip of bone the scent will soak into the sun and travel, very slowly as before stepping. The leader tips his head a fraction, neither bowing nor raising some angle between. You mirror him. The landing holds no one. It holds a scent. The line of people moves again, each shoulder taking its rightful share. You look back once, only once. The wind lifts a fine thread of smoke and offers it to the water where you read the 2 different waves. You don't count steps, you count breaths. Breath through the nose as breath steady. The fire tender walks last, the pouch of live coals against her side. Sometimes she touches it lightly, like a hand to a sleeping child's brow, checking the pulse of warmth. The memory keeper sings very low, not an old song, just a chain of sounds with ochre's smell. The leader listens forward. Reed gauge leaning just enough. The moisture underfoot changes by a shade. You shift weight into the lead thigh so your heel only kisses the ground. The left wing goes parallel to the rock shoulder. The right wing draws a soft line through the grass flat. The wind blinds are down, the water trap is open. You leave the landing like a sentence just read, no closing the book, just laying a leaf as a mark. Above, the water road of night birds has slid past the oak crown to another side. You don't only look, you carry it in your head, a guide thread pulling soft as smoke. You think of Red Tongue not as a place, but as a smell ochre in the fire. Pine pitch sealing the roof's hem. Oak smoke rising very slowly over the reeds. The landing will go on lying quiet by the river, listening to the fire breathe lightly in the ash. The pitch's gentle resin lifting with the smoke. A strand of human breath still resting on the arrowstone. Above, the water road of night birds slides gently over other canopies, toward wherever tomorrow will call your feet. You touch the yoke lightly and shift your shoulders with a soft move. The probing staff goes ahead. The river's voice goes with you. The home fire is warm in its pouch, and your head carries a landing that has been named. You catch the faint iron in the wind before the sky changes colour. The ridge of black cloud looks like the back of a giant beast lying on its side, slowly lifting as if it had just remembered its name. On the river's skin, bands of water swell and shrink, flashing silver and dark at once, a sign of shifting wind and a coming dump of rain. The memory keeper opens his palm to feel the rasp in the gusts, then presses that hand to your chest. Just a dot of touch. Tonight the roof must sing softly, or the wind will sing for it. The leader tilts his reed to read the wind and flicks a glance at the bare hillside. He doesn't say storm. He simply holds up 2 fingertips, 2 watches of big wind, one of trailing wind. The fire tender is already hugging the live coal pouch to her hip. Reed tube clamped in her teeth. One stray spark at the wrong time and the first burst of rain could snuff all of you tonight. The seamstress holds the bone needle between her fingertips, her eyes already sizing the seam that needs mending along the roof's edge, as if storms were the business of thread set right, and they pass. The landing has been good since noon, but a storm night needs a different back. The leader points to the earth bank against the woods, where 2 oaks stand far enough apart to stretch a steep windbreak. You and the young hunter carry polished shin-bone stakes, cinch wet softened sinew, and weight the hem with flat stones. The old roof is down in 3 breaths, the new one up in 6. The front edge is pressed low. the back edge drawn just high enough so smoke can slip out but rain can't stab in. The seamstress kneels, the bone needle skimming the lap seam along the roof's edge. The sinew goes in wet so it locks as it dries. You hear the needle tick rasp breath, steady as a pulse. She stops where tearing comes easy, adds a locking stitch, then looks up at the clouds. A left wind will yank here. She tells you to mix pitch pine resin cooked to syrup with fine ochre and charcoal, and smear a thin coat along the hide where slant rain will strike. The pitch warms into the air, blending with the damp earth smell before a dump of rain, like someone speaking very close. The fire tender digs a low hearth between two rocks, spreads a layer of wet sand and small stones, lays the live coals in, covers with a little dry grass, blows through the reed. The fire wriggles up like a fish that's just cleared the bank, standing after a single beat. A low hearth lets the wind lick without snatching. The left stone blocks the rain's head. The roof shelters the fire's back. Tonight the fire lies down, not stands, she tells you. Before the rain, the coat must retell itself. The seamstress lays a deer hide over dry grass and asks you to set your jackets back on it. She turns the flesh side out and shows a fine stress line where the yoke has bitten after days on the trail. This lap needs 2 passes and a lock, she says. The bone needle is thin as a blade of grass, its eye small as a raindrop before it hits the ground. You hold the wet sinew between thumb and forefinger, pulling it so it remembers its twist. When it dries, it will shrink and hug the hide. Each stitch you pull with breath. Not eyes, your eyes watch the line. Your breath draws the needle. The seamstress nods. Don't hurry. The wind hears hurrying. The shoulder done, she moves to a hood. Tonight the head needs its own roof. She cuts a thin piece of hide and pieces a cowl that cups the nape, slits a small vent by the ear so you can hear the wind. The edge is brushed with a thin coat of pitch so water beads and doesn't soak. You pull it on, the wind's voice drops half a notch. The far pounding of leaves turns to thread-fine rain. Good, she says. On a big sky night, ears must listen low. Feet are fire from below. The young hunter gathers fine dry grass, clean moss, and a handful of bark fibres. You braid an insole and set it into the softened leather shoes you loosened earlier. This drinks sweat and gives back warmth, the memory keeper says. When it's wet, wring it. Don't swap it out. He shows how to lay the moss with the grain so your toes slide easy and don't snag. The fire tender warms the shoes' insides at the low hearth, not enough to make the leather draw. The smell of warm hide and pitch folds into oak smoke, a faint lullaby. You try them on heel-cupped, toe breathing warm. A storm night is walked with the head, but lived by the feet. You remember that line. The leader sign's tailwind will strike the right post. You and the young hunter are to guys, one straight, one diagonal, tied with the keep-sleep knot the seamstress taught yesterday so a jerk won't slip it. At the foot corners you smear pitch over the sinew not to glue it, to seal it against wet. The young mother lays broad leaves into water baffles and sets a drain around the hearth. Rain will run out and won't heave the ash. The fire tender props a stiff twig as a bridge to give the smoke a straight path. If the smoke gets lost, the water will follow. She smiles. Before the rain, the fire needs a name. The memory keeper sprinkles ochre around the rim, not into the heart. Red fire is home fire, ochre red, so the night will know it. He speaks very softly once, in a season of twisted wind. Smoke striped the roof, all night was wet, and everyone coughed till dawn. Since then, the home fire always wears a ring of scent. Wind uses scent to no kin. The fire tender rations wood by the hour at first. Thicker, slightly damp branches, smoky but lying low, in mid-rain. Fine dry twigs to hold the red. At the end, a single hard stick the heat will carry. You stack them close, each stick not to be touched until its watch. The first drops fall like grains of sand on mica, a thin sound. Then thousands. Rain shoulders the hem. Wind licks the edge. You sit angled, back to a post, hood pulled across your ears. The rain's voice steps back a half. The leader listens to wind, not rain. He shifts a peg by one knuckle, and the snatch softens. The fire lies beautifully. Smoke creeps low and stands at the slit you left. The low hearth swallows blown water. The warm smell of pitch goes even, marrying the ochre into the night's fragrance, not fear's smell, the smell of being. The seamstress draws out her needle along the young mother's shoulder seam and adds 2 locks. Storms like to enter by the old road, she says. Lock the way it remembers. The baby sleeps in the sling. Breathing even, its face takes the firelight very gently. The memory keeper gives a short windtail only a scrap. The night is long, 1 season. The wind stood 3 days. The river didn't change. Leaves made no sound. Our ears began to look for their own voices. Children spelled smoke. The old spelled songs. On the 3rd night, the wind named itself anew and crossed the roof like a creature already tamed. He taps a fish backbone left from supper. A sound as small as rain stopped by the roof. Hear this, he says. You listen 3 knocks, a pause, 2 knocks. Any night you hear that beat, switch your yoke to the right shoulder before you cross the rill. You smile, a lesson tied to rhythm the head remembers easier. The fire tender changes to dry twigs. The flame lifts a notch. The smoke still lies. The rain shifts a hair. The hood keeps the noise outside. The storm night feels like a room laid out by seam, guy, hood, and low hearth, each set exactly where it belongs. At mid-watch, the seamstress passes the needle to the older child who learned the water step yesterday. Lock wind with a needle, she says, not only with stakes. She teaches a simple stitch, a slanted overcast. Snug, even. Each stitch like a step on mud that doesn't sink. The child breathes evenly, eyes unstrained, hands going in and out without biting the hide. You see on that face a look older by a notch. And here seams, the seamstress whispers. The day you set stakes on a ridge, you'll remember tonight's stitch. The memory keeper adds one more piece once. An old line of stitching told those who came after that a windwreck had been mended there, don't plant the wind's head there again. Even when we're gone, the seam speaks in our place. Second watch hits the back. Thighs ache. Shoulder heavy from sitting slanted too long. The young mother shifts the sling to the lee side, takes 2 small steps under the roof. Her back taps a post once. Her knee nudges a stone once enough to wake the blood. You hold your palm toward the fire, not close just enough for the skin to drink a thin sip. The hood keeps the head's breath. Your face warms very slowly but sure. The fire tender sets the last watch's fuel, a single hard stick laid on the bias. One end on stone, one on sand, so the fire eats slowly. Don't let it go hungry, or she says, hungry. It cries, tonight needs quiet. By the last watch, the rain draws back like a beast that sees it's not being chased. Drops separate into single notes. You lift the hood and taste a mouthful of wind. The faint iron is gone, replaced by bruised leaf. The leader returns the pegs to their usual angle. The roof's voice shifts from tick-tack to breathing. The memory keeper lays a hand on the hearthstone, warm enough. He smiles with his eyes. You look at the seam you locked last evening dry. Hugging, not drinking. The bone needle is wiped clean, the eye turned home in its pouch. Spare sinew is coiled and pressed between 2 layers of hide so morning won't find it turned to wire. The fire tender boils water with red stones as at red tongue 2 reds dropped into the water skin. A small rustle rises. You stir a touch of rabbit fat into warm water and pass it round. The baby sips a breath of heat. The mother's shoulders drop half a step. The memory keeper warms a pinch of last season's dried sweet leaf. Swipes a low ring along the ground. Give the night its smell back. He doesn't look up. He listens for a tiny sound in the hearth. The quiet crack of a stone shrinking as the water pulls away. Come morning, the rill will be fine. Before sleep he draws a thin ochre mark on the stone beside the hearth, shorter and paler than the stripe that names a landing, a sign that the storm passed over the roof and didn't enter the people. He doesn't explain. Everyone here knows. You pull the hood down a notch. Lie on your side so one ear hears the wind outside and your chest hears the fire within. First sleep comes like an animal that knows its name. It sets a paw beside you, lies down, and breathes evenly. You wake before the sun shows its face. The roof still breathes, beads gathered at the hemfall on time, no rush, no backsplash. Last night's smoke has left a thin brown thread on the hearthstone, dry enough not to smudge to the touch. The earth exhales steam with no strange scent, only itself wet leaves warming, stone just sated with water. The leader stretches. Reed staff dipped to the ground. He tilts his head at the familiar angle, hearing the wind return to a gentler key. The fire tender rakes out coals, feeds a very small dry twig so the red wakes, but the smoke still lies. The seamstress slips off the hood and nudges it to you. Last night ears listened low, now let a little sun in. The young hunter walks the roofline and shakes each stake firm. You feel the pitch line hugging tight. No weeping. The night has passed over the roof, like last night's ochre said. When the sun is still cold is when hides long to drink smoke. The seamstress rigs a low smoke chamber behind the hearth, 3 bent sticks in an arch, a long-dried thin hide over it, a wrist-wide yawn left for smoke to flow in. Fuel is punk wood and bark smoke thick, cool, with little flame. She lays the deer hide flesh side up and rubs in marrow fat warmed on red stones. This teaches the hide to remember soft. You roll around river stone along the grain. No heavy pressure, the hide listens to hands better than to force. Spare sinew from last night is minced fine into the fat, so, as it soaks, it lays inner threads. Done? The hide hangs from a crossbone and is eased into the smoke. The door is pinched down. Smoke seeps slowly. The scent of punk wood and fat turns the hide a shade no longer glossy, but a matte like sundust. Every half watch you turn it, when one face has had enough swap. The seamstress scratches a tiny nail mark at a corner speech for her alone. Next the shoes the grass insole is pulled, wrung, and hung under the smoke arch. The hood gets a light warm to shake off the storm's odour. The fine smoke takes its place. The memory keeper smiles. Smoke is the smell of home even when home is moving. After rain, stone breaks if heated too soon. The leader has you dig a new fire belly a half-hand deeper, lined with briefly dried sand, and last night's ash sand is bed, ash's blanket. You pick fist-sized chert and let them warm a watch near the hearth. When the stones have drunk enough mild heat, you set them not in the heart but near, and bury them in ash like tubers. The fire tender holds an even heat, no flare, no fail. A hairline pop whispers somewhere. The leader frowns and throws ash over the reddest spot. Stone teaches slowness, he says. After a watch and a half, you tease the stones to the rim, blanket them with a thin ash quilt to cool. You tap them. The tone is rounder, the faces take the dry light. Fractures run cleaner, fresh blades come with fewer scars. You dress a needle-fine point and test it on a dry sinew. The cut goes without a sound. The young hunter practices. The leader lays a hand on his wrist, reining in excess force. Once stone has finished inhaling, all it needs is a reason to leave, he says. A flake snaps perfectly into the palm. The child's eyes shine like 2 slivers of sun that just slipped through the roof. In last night's storm, your spear shaft took a hairline crack near the socket. Time for pitch to do its work. The fire tender melts resin on a hot stone and stirs in fine charcoal and shredded inner bark a black glossy paste supple as set fat. The leader pinches in a dust of the ochre so its scent stands with the home fire. You ease the crack open, smear pitch inside, press shut. Spiral wrap tight with wet sinew, then skin a thin coat outside. Hold the shaft above the low-far fire warm, not boiling. Turn the spear slowly, the pitch shifts from red-brown to matte black, hugging the sinew like a shell hugs a kernel. When it sets, you flex lightly, the spring returns. The wood is quiet. The leader nods. When pitch can smell ochre, it remembers home. Things that remember home break less. The storm has shifted the reel a notch. The memory keeper leads you to a new shallow where the dropped water has bared white stone ribs like fish bones. Where the water runs the colour of weak tea, the belly is broad. Where it turns cold green, it's deep. Set the comb on the colour seam, he says. The group weaves a new fish comb of branches and grass, posts it with small bone stakes, buried on the bias to meet the push. One gate to take fish from above, one to let the small pass. The young mother lays bead-like stones at the escape, enough for little fish to squeeze out, not enough to trick them back into the trap. You plant 2 indicator twigs, dry and peeled white knee-high, on either bank if the water hugs halfway up. The trap is right. More than that. Lift the comb half a pace. Lashings are candied with thinned pitch, a thin smear where they rub so the water strokes, not tears. By mid-afternoon, the trap gives 2 wrist-thick fish and 1 larger enough for a warm, light meal. You tie them with sinew and hang them in shade, not close to the fire, save the fat for evening. After rain afternoons are for advanced stitches. The seamstress spreads a spare hide and scratches with a nail the 4 corners that take the wind when a roof is drawn tight. She shows a double overcast 2 offset slants when wind hits this. The 4 splits, then a locking stitch at their crossing, a hidden loop. A gentle cinch, the knot buried. The older child repeats, breath steady, hand light. You watch the new line travel across the hide like fresh runnels across a river bar set right. Water, wind passes through and won't bow it. Read the wind in the seam, she says. Not only in the leaves. A gust leaves marks on thread where it fuzzed, where it stretched. At dawn, I'd feel that line and you'll know what the night meant. The memory keeper adds from now on, seams are also sentences for those who follow meant to be felt, not retold. The roof has kept people for a night, now keep the roof. You and the young hunter test each knot, swap frayed lines for fresh sinew. Smear an ultra-thin stripe of pitch along the path where cord saws overhide. You grease the posts at the foot so the soil will hold them soft without squeezing. Before lowering, the seamstress sets her brow to the right post for half a beat and neither bow nor raise. The post watched the night in our stead, she says. A slim ring of ochre is drawn where wood kisses dirt, giving the post a small name. The memory keeper sweeps ash into 3 small fans at the corners, each touched by a grain of ochre. The leader dots a fingertip of fat on the centre of the roof, now folded, and lays it amid the ash fans. Night eats fat by smoke, earth eats fat by scent. Both give it back to people by letting them pass, he whispers. The young mother guides the child's finger to the little ochre on the post's foot and wipes a dot on its cheek. So the night remembers the face that slept easy here. She smiles. The trap adds 2 small fish near noon. The meal isn't loud, only warm. The fire tender keeps the flame low. Grills fish over coals, fat dripping without a hiss. Sour leaves warmed a breath and crumbled. You pass the first bite to the elders, the belly to the child, bones laid as before, pointing toward the water. After, you sit and dress 2 new blades from the cooled chert, a paring knife for the seamstress. A broad point for the young hunter's light spear. The leader sights the edges in the sun thin. Even? He doesn't praise in words. He returns each to its owner. By late day, the landing is folded. Roof down, stakes up, fire pit filled with sand, ash rubbed thin till the soil's colour returns. The fire tender takes a tiny coal, draws a short mark on the underside of the hearth's first stone, and sets it down. Anyone who lifts it will know this hearth kept a storm night gentle. You pack your kit, smoke-cured hide folded wide. The hood hung outside to let the wind pass a while. Shoes stuffed with their dry insoles. The young hunter gathers leftover sinew, rolls it into a nest, and slips it into the seamstress's pouch. The storm night ochre mark stays. No one touches it. The leader calls 3 listenings before you go. Listen to water stand by the rill. Close your eyes. Count 3 kinds of fall stone, bank, root. If one is missing, take another path. Listen to wind turn your back to the riverbank. Open the hood over half an ear, and smell. If the faint iron remains, swap the hook in your pouch, the rein still sits in the ground. Listen to body, switch the yoke to the shoulder that rested in the night. Loosen the sling by a seed's width, eyes straight, neither high nor low. Let the road take its rhythm from the chest, not the heel. The seamstress nods. The fire tender tightens the live coal pouch. The memory keeper lowers his hand once more to the hearth stone. The landing is quiet. You step out. Cold sun passes over your skin like leaves combing hair. Grass that has drunk rain gives back a soft sound underfoot. The reed staff taps stone lightly. The road answers in a low voice. Behind you, the hearth smoke is gone. A trace of pitch clings to the rolled roof's hem in its wrap. That scent travels very slowly, like a sentence murmured for a long time. The memory keeper walks in the middle. He doesn't sing, only keeps time with breath. The baby sleeps in the front sling, a faint, dry ochre dot on its cheek. You glance back once. Where the roof stood is only a patch of grass a half-tone darker than the rest. A stone turned face down with a secret stripe of charcoal beneath, and the rill running new as if never questioned. The landing stays, the people go. The home fire lies in its pouch. The bone needle rests in the seamstress's bag. The pitch sleeps in a crack of stone. High above, the water road of night birds can't be seen by day, but you know it's there, a sky-worn path, waiting for darkness to point it out. Tomorrow, somewhere else. The roof will sing softly again. The needle will lock the wind again. The fire will lie down again. And the pitch's scent will send a hair-thin line into the air again. You shift the yoke to the rested shoulder. Your breathing stays even. Ahead, the road is cool. The sun is cool and your head is warm just enough to remember a storm night has passed. And the stitching has taught you how to walk. You hear the rivers singing before you see its face. A thin, lateral sound, as if someone were drawing a strand of glass from bank to bank. Young ice is learning to speak. At the grass's edge, water has put on a sheer, transparent skin that shatters into leaf shapes when a bird sets down a foot and lifts it again, leaving peppered egg prints. The white season asks no one's leave. It moves into the lungs first, the hands after. The memory keeper lifts his palm to catch the wind, not letting it pass. Holding it for half a beat. Today's cold smells of wet stone, he says. Not the faint iron of a storm. This is a standing cold. The leader nods lightly and tilts his reed to read how much light the day still holds little. The day is withdrawing. The fire tender hugs the live coal pouch tighter than usual. Flames won't be enough to keep the night outside. Tonight the fire must lie deep. The seamstress studies your leather shoes for a long moment, sets a finger on a grey seep at the toe. Cold water comes in through this mark, she says. Before dark, your feet need a coat of fur. The snow deer hide from last season is brought down. The seamstress strokes the nap against and with the grain to listen to the direction. Hairs pointing outward shed water, hairs pointing inward hold heat. She explains. Inside must hold, outside must shed. She chooses the shin for the inner layer fine, oily hair cut lengthwise, not across, so the fibres stay whole. The ungrained side goes to the outer shoe. The hair angled down toward the toe so water runs off. You lay the hide on a flat stone and use the new chirp blade from this morning heat treated properly to cut close to the grain. The cut takes dry light and doesn't tear hair. The seamstress takes a fine bone needle, its eye no bigger than a raindrop, pulls sinew that's been soaked wet, and gives it a gentle stretch to set its memory. These shoes will have 2 hearts, she says. One inside to warm, one outside to drive water. Only when both sink in your feet sleep. The inner layer is a fur sock. She places fur sides together and flesh side out so the seam sits on flesh and invisible overcast, snug enough not to bite the hair. The collar is turned inward and hemmed with grain stitches, one hidden lock at the heel. The knot buried between layers so long miles don't pry it open. You hold the uppers on your thigh, drawing towards yourself as you send the needle. Letting go as you cinch the shoe loans your breath from the first stitch. She adds a slim ankle strap of flattened sinew, enough to bind to the leather trouser leg later. A smear of marrow fat goes along the flesh side seam, fat fends off water and the bite of the wind. For the outer, fur faces out, flesh in. A teardrop pad is hidden at the toe so stones under ice won't pinch the nails. The fire tender burns punk wood to give the shell a quick smoke. The smoke goes thin, leaving behind a water-shedding scent. Pine pitch cooked to brown-black, mixed with charcoal and shredded inner bark, is drawn in hair-thin lines along the toe seam and sole edge. Not thick pitch cracks in cold. Thin rides the hide. There's no rawhide outsole yet. You'll build the bed first. The young hunter brings a bundle of fine grass, clean dry leaves, and thick moss. The memory keeper teaches braid grass into a round nest. Lay the fibres lengthwise under the toes so they slide without shoving the bed. Put moss along the instep where sweat runs. If it wets, pull it out, wring, swap positions for a bit, then set it back. Warmth mustn't be tied down. Warmth comes from breath. You slide the liner into the shell and try them on. Your feet hear a very slow quiet, a pulse rising from the soles. The toe tips finding a place that knows them. On young ice, walking isn't only about warmth. It's about keeping the surface calm. The seamstress weaves a thin grass-goad a little ladder, lashes it to the outer sole with diagonal sinew, then paints a thread of pitch. The grass teeth take the ice like fish scales take water. Each step clicks a tiny, quiet hold. The leader hands over 2 leaf-shaped twig frames, snow treadles for the morning's thin crust. Not full snowshoes, just frames to spread weight while the snow is still soft. You set your feet on them, tie 3 points with sinew, and circle the camp 3 short loops. The frames whisper a dry grass note and don't bite the ice. Tomorrow at first light we cross the white bar at the river's head. The leader says, "Don't forget the smell of cold when you go." The memory keeper teaches white season breathing a thin leather kerchief over the mouth and nose, breathing through it so the warmth returns before it reaches the lungs. A cold that bites the lungs bites the step, he says. Short, even strides don't let your pulse chase you. He names the smells of cold, dry cold like the ping of a struck whetstone. Damp cold like wet fur, wind cold like a snapped blade of grass. Smell only 3 times, don't keep smelling, he warns. Noses tire too. The seamstress sets your hood snug against the cheeks, leaving a slit for the ear. Cold runs into ears fast, and she says, "Hear it, but don't let it lodge." The hearth is moved lower under the roof on the eve of ice. The fire tender digs a small side pit, a cold well for dense air to sink. so smoke can find a softer way out. The low hearth eats small hard wood, glowing steady. Sand is bedded twice as deep as on the storm night the earth in white asks more, bedding for fire. You boil water with red stones as on recent nights. Slower. Warm water drawn through the face kerchief softens the toothache of cold. The young mother gives the baby a sip of thin fat in warm water. Its eyes drift and close. Morning. The white bar at the river mouth opens like a great unrolled hide. Writing was laid on it in the night, 4 quick sharp tracks of rabbit, 2 even rails of deer, small cautious loops of fox. The memory keeper touches each sign. Rabbit fed there, deer passed because the water changed, the fox turned back when it heard the ice sing. You set your spearhead parallel to the deer marks and measure the beats between steps. In the cold, steps shorten. The tracks say the herd is slow. The leader doesn't hurry. He takes the group across the white on the bias, don't stamp on their letters so by night they can read themselves again. At the reach of young ice, the song rises in pitch. The leader signals down. You lay your chest to the surface and spread your arm and wriggle like a snake. Weight spread out. Spear across in front of you, pushing a span at a time. People spaced apart. Weights don't stack. A tiny snapping thread under your elbow. You stop. Count 3 breaths. Slip half a hand to the left. The tone shifts. Go on. The memory keeper reminds you don't question ice with your feet. Ice answers to ears. On the far bank, the leader touches his brow to the ice for 1 beat. Not long. He lays a small ochre mark at a reed root on the shore, a sign not to use this way when the day turns warm. Wind starts cutting across the flats. A needle of pain touches the cheekbone, that's where the hood needs to hold closer. The seamstress pulls a very thin scrap of hide from her pouch and patches the hood's edge exactly where the cold is biting you. The bone needle pricks lightly. The sinew is drawn just so not tight enough to pucker the leather. Your sweat warms under the patch. The sting eases. Ice makes a mirror. Eyes get burned not by fire, but by glare. You drop the hood half a finger lower, letting the lid shade the white halo. Walk by the neck and not the eyes. At the tree line, you halt as the sun slants. The low hearth tucked by a trunk out of the wind, the cold well is scraped quickly. The fire tender heats 2 stones to red. You drop them into the water skin. Warmth answers cold from the inside as fire answers from without. The memory keeper offers a very short tale. White nights dislike many words long ago. Ice entered a man's shelter and ate his feet with a song. After that, he set the firebed deeper, sewed seams tighter, wore a thicker face cloth. The ice kept singing, but he slept. He smiles small. The seamstress rubs fat onto the soles and lets them kiss the smoke, not flame. Fat enters smoke. Smoke enters fat. The soles turn a warm colour. Supper is light meat dried for 2 days. Thin fat warmed for the baby. Dried leaves kissed by heat till crisp. You eat slowly, counting by breath. In the white, fat is a promise. Fat goes into the chest as cold goes into the cheeks. Fur shoes rest by the fire to drink heat, not to get wet. The grass bed is pulled, wrung, and rotated. The seamstress finds a sinew whisker poking from the toe seam. She nips it flush with stone, licks a finger, and smooths it down, spitters enough to teach sinew to lie quietly. The roof is staked low. Wind walks the roof's back, not into the room. You tuck the bone needle under your pillow, not for luck or taboo, but because in the morning your shoes will want 1 more stitch. The fire lies. The cold well drinks the heavy air first so flames can breathe evenly. Outside, the ice keeps singing very softly. Inside, the fat keeps warm very softly. Sleep comes slowly the way you walk on white, no rush, no slip, laying down 1 part of yourself each time. By thin morning, the white opens wider. The ice is no longer a skin. It has turned to glass with a deeper voice. The sun rises without warmth, sharp as a blade. The leader pulls your hood another half finger down and points the sun go straight into eyes. It skips the skin. The memory keeper smears a thin band of black ash beneath your eyes. From the cheekbone to the tail. Shadow drinks sun so your eyes aren't thirsty, he says. A smile the size of a breath. The seamstress sets a stiff, narrow strip of hide to the hood's edge. A little awning for the brow. 2 tacks only, so the strip can sway with wind and not slap your eyes. You look up to try it, the white glare eases. Your eyes breathe easier. Out on the ice, the river has become a blinding page. First lesson of the day, look by shadows, not by light. Tree shadows, stake shadows, your own gentler things to read the road. The leader teaches reading ice by ear. He taps his spear tip 3 light times on the surface. A high. Needle, ping, newborn ice or old ice thawed and caught again go around. A low note like stone on wet wood thick. Even ice goes straight. A hollow. Lingering tone water very near lie down and crawl or back away. He points out fractures, starburst cracks from a point with pale lines running out go round. Long straight thread grey stop. Count 3 breaths. Listen for a change of key. Milky white seams under the surface paired with trapped bubbles walk at the edge of a tree's shadow for safety. You practice here 1 note. Stop. Lay your ear to the ice. Listen to its answer. Ice doesn't speak much. It changes voice only if you press it. The lesson is don't press. He doesn't wait for an accident to teach. He teaches before, in a shallow run at the head of the flats. You test on purpose. The young hunter is belayed with a length of sinew, one end to his waist, the other to a stake. He steps. The ice breaks as planned. He drops to his chest. He takes a breath, lays his spear across his chest, lets it bridge the edges, kicks, floats up, and belly crawls sideways along the shaft to shore. He doesn't stand. He rolls away 5 body lengths, then kneels, head low, breathing. No one claps. They only watch his breath return to even. The seamstress wraps him at once in a dry fur cloth. The fire tender slides red stones into a water skin for him to hug. The young mother rubs fat into his ankles. The leader signs a slow circle walk until his face and hands are warm again. The memory keeper ends the lesson with a line as short as a breath. Don't stand when ice has just let you go. Ice is jealous of feet. You repeat it in your head, spear across chest, kick, crawl, roll. 4 words like 4 seasons, do them right, and you live. By noon the wind changes voice. A thin tone runs straight into the sinuses. The seamstress peels a birch bark strip as long as a hand, cuts a narrow slit with the chert, dulls the edges. A mask is set over your nose, 2 sinew ties around the head, not at the nape. The slit lets less light in, the wind stings less. Inside, she pads it with a thin fur strip so the bridge of your nose doesn't burn. The neck wrap is rabbitback fur inward, flesh outward. The edge locked with rice grain stitches so wind can't find a path. It just kisses the throat, keeping the breath road warm. The memory keeper smiles, wind reads neck before back. Hide the neck and you hide half the back. You put on the mask and wrap. Breathe out 2 faint plumes through the slit. They vanish at once. Eyes ache less. Cheeks bite less. Your soles have been eating ice a full day. The grass teeth are scuffed. The leader hands you a handful of thin wood scales cut from willow and birch, each like a fingernail, pre-bent to match the sole's curve. The seamstress shingles them from toe to heel, each overlapping the last, facing back so they slip less on ice and bite better on climbs. You brush the thinnest pitch first, lay a scale, hold 1 breath, then take a slanting stitch of sinew through the 2 tiny pre-drilled holes. The stitch slants like a blade of grass crossing wind. The soles look like the belly of a little fish, but they'll skip less on a frozen slope. The young hunter tests them, nudging the toe into ice, listening for the faint catch. He looks back at you, eyes bright but quiet joy, and the cold must be held gently or it shatters. The light changes key. The day's hunting hour is brief. Short day hunting is hand-fast hunting. The leader takes up a throwing stick short shaft with a spooned heel, its face oiled smooth by many seasons. A light dart of heat-treated chert at the tip, a slim tang set into a wand, a hand longer than your forearm. The seamstress fletches the tail with 2 waterbird feathers set slightly off to keep the dart true. Sinew binding, a bead of fat pitch at the joint. You and the young hunter follow the rabbit's script across the white into reed fringe. The thrower comes up, draws past the ear, and drives with your back in 1 breath. The dart flies neither too high nor too hard. The rabbit bolts. The dart nails the ice half a hand ahead. It veers. The young hunter sends a clean crosscut on its track. The rabbit slides into reeds, snags, and stops. The leader comes in 2 steps, hands lighter than wind. No words, only a dot of ochre set on a thistle leaf nearby. Supper is enough, a single rabbit. Shared. No more needed. In the white, enough is enough. Back at camp where the seamstress checks the sole scales hugging, sinew lying, a single backward tilted scale at the toe she trims and dots a touch of pitch. Your ankle gets a thin cross-heel keeper, a relief for the tired joint when walking long on white. You lift the shoes and feel the new sole with your hand. The teeth aren't sharp, only a fine rasp like a fish's tongue. They'll bite just enough without tearing the ice. Night's hearth sits close to the wind wall. The cold well dug a finger deeper than yesterday. The fire-tender bed's thick sand lays fine, hard wood and brings the red up very slowly. Eyes on the river ice reflect the fire like two far eyes sleeping half open. You warm the water skin on a red stone and drink warmth runs down the throat like a hand stroking it. The memory keeper tells one more short piece. The length of a breath. A man walked the white listening only to himself, not to the ice. The ice bit his legs. He didn't hold his spear across. He stood too soon. The ice bit him again. After that, he smeared ash under his eyes and used shadow to travel. He grew old, but his eyes stayed dark. He laughs in his throat. You hear the fire eat wood in tiny sounds. Smoke goes down the well gently. The night nips the roof. The bone needle under your pillow lies still. Morning is very thin. The white is colder but kinder. The fur shoes have learned the ice's face. The fire tender buries the hearth and rubs the ash till the ground's colour comes back. The seamstress unstraps the twig frames and leans them on a stake. A small V-mark of sinew is tied to it so passers-by can read, "Walked the white," and came through. The memory keeper draws a slim stripe of ochre on the white by a handprint. The mark melts very slowly into the mist. Ochre for the white so it knows our thanks, he says. Not for others to read so we can read ourselves again. The leader checks your ankle keepers, wind mask, neck wrap, and shingled soles, all in place. He skates a very fine line on the ice with his spear butt the way out. Not deep enough for the ice to remember, just enough for your eyes. You cinch the yoke, settle the live coal pouch against your hip, balance the spear on your shoulder. Walk by shadow plant your feet on the edge of the stake's shadow, the tree's shadow, the shadow of the one ahead. Each step speaks a single word to the ice. The ice answers with quiet. Knife sun skims your hood's edge. The ash under your eyes drinks some of it. Today's cold smells of dry fur. Your shoes did right. The wind is in flakes. The mask blunts it. Your chest is warm just enough. Off to the left, a hairline crack runs long. The note is low, not hollow. You drift around it in a tree's shade. The young hunter draws a line in the air with one finger along the edge, a sign for himself. You all tilt toward the forest brim. The young mother lifts the baby's head, adjusts its wrap. 10 steps later, the baby sleeps again. The seamstress lays a hand on your hood like touching a bird's wing and gives the smallest nod. The seam is saying the right thing. High above, the water road of the nightbirds isn't seen by day, but you know it waits there, ready to point when dark comes. Underfoot, the ice still sings softly in your hand. The spear still holds the gentle warmth of last night's pitch. In your chest, the fire lies very small, enough to walk one more white day. You don't look back. The ochre on the white will fade at the right hour. The path will close by wind. The hearth lies in its pouch. What you need to remember is moving with you now 4 words that save you on ice. 3 smells of cold, 2 hearts of a shoe, and 1 song of ice that makes you slow down, and you go light, even by shadow. The cave mouth opens like a giant eyelid half closed, showing a dark pupil at the centre. The wind here doesn't blow, it breathes in and out. The smell of wet stone arrives before the smell of people. Moss pressed to the ground arrives before the trace of fire fat still clinging to hair. The memory keeper murmurs, "The cave has lungs. Lungs hear a storm before skin does." You touch a cool lime wall with one finger just a beat and let go. Stone that's cold and steady is safe. Stone that's cold and short of breath means the weather is changing. The leader signals to set the hearth just outside the mouth. A fire pit as deep as on the storm night, but as low as on the white night. The cold well is dug off to the left so smoke can choose a path upward without curling back into the eye. The fire tender slices a dry stick of birch into ribbons, rolls them with drained pine bark, ties with sinew a torch for short paths. Long paths want lying light. He pours fat into a stone cup lined with fine sand and nests a wick of dry moss. A fat lamp doesn't shine big, but it shines where you need it, near the ground, near the signs. The seamstress opens the pouch of ochre. She doesn't draw, she dabs a small dot at knee-height on the edge of the wall, at a child's hand reach. "This is the way back," she says. "Whoever tires can put a hand to this spot." The hand says a sentence. The spot remembers a person. You smile small, inside stone. Even a smile should go barefoot. You tie a line around the young hunter's waist, the other end to a stake by the hearth. The rope isn't to bind, but to remember. Remember the path. Remember the person. The leader gives you a dry twig with a cold stitch to its tip. The ember goes a step ahead, your eyes half a step behind. Every 5 steps you set a pebble into a seam on the wall, every 20. You touch a thin stroke of oak. The cave will remember you, but don't demand it remember everything. The first chamber is wide as a wind belly. The floor is damp, not wet. Old bear tracks have blurred, fresh marten pricks are sharp. The memory keeper bends close and listens small, no sleeping bear smell. Tonight isn't a night to share beds. Shoulders loosen. The doorway is for a temporary bed, wind passes. Smoke escapes. The child has stars to look at. The leader plants a short peg by the wall and hangs a pouch of spare chert blades. In caves, falling stone changes tempo. When the tempo changes, hands need stone. You feel the heat-treated chert blades you made yourself and remember the crack like raindrops when the fire ran red. Stone taught by fire, now taught to walk in the dark. You lower the fat lamp near the floor to read the small letters, the crawl lines of night beetles, the wet thread of a snail, the fresh sand spatter fallen from the roof. On the wall, a very old black smear, the charcoal of someone who passed through many storm seasons. The young hunter lifts a finger to touch. You check his wrist lightly, wordless. That black is an old voice. Our hands are for setting the lamp so it can speak clearer. The sound shifts as you turn into a side passage. The drip loses its evenness and turns into a ring. You hiss lightly, "Stop!" The leader rests the lamp on a stone lip. The fat light spreads and touches a row of limestone teeth growing downward from the roof stalactites. Each drop is one very slow year, the memory keeper says. The boy tilts his head back, wobbling under a stone sky. You tug his hood lower, stone doesn't fall like wind, but keep your head covered when you look up. Deeper in the lamp changes hands. The seamstress follows you, an ochre pouch pinned at her hip so it won't brush the walls. She whispers, "Don't breathe too big. The lamp eats breath." You sip a short breath, count 3 in your chest. Let it go. The flame holds steady. You come to a place where the cave swells like a throat. The sound flips your palm, pats your thigh, and the echo returns twice. The memory keeper smiles. "Here." It answers with an mm. He doesn't say maze. He gives a tiny whoop so the stone can test its kinship. The right hand echoes heavier. The leader chooses the left, places where the stone speaks less usually breathe easier. On the wall, a hand very small negative. Not anyone's in the band. Someone once blew ochre through a hollow bone around their hand, leaving a white flower in the centre, red all around. The young hunter inhales hard, the flame wavers. You press your palm to your chest and calm the flame. The seamstress studies that hand-shaped space for a long time, measuring nothing, comparing nothing. This hand was set here so another hand could go on, she says as if to the fire. The leader forbids touching. He dots a tiny mark of ochre low and well away, at a child's eye line. Way back, he reminds. You dip the lamp so its light won't lick the old mark. You all sit a moment at the edge of this widening. The fire tender trims the wick, lifts it to a grain when the flame slackens. The young mother draws the baby tight, her back against a warm patch of wall. Stone is warm here, she breathes, talking to her spine. The memory keeper tips a pouch and spills a black nub of manganese the size of a finger. He sniffs once and smiles. This black travels far. Black for a stylus, red for words, both need breath. Before going on, the leader lays out a breath test. A dry reed, this tip greased thin, is given a pinprick of flame. He moves the spark before him, then up, then down. At chest height the point stays red. Near the floor it dulls. Near a low ceiling it goes greenish for a blink. Go low, but don't hug the ground, he says. The earth drinks the fire's breath. You hold the lamp at your chest and count steps with your breathing. The deeper you go, the softer stone speaks. Limescale spills like milk on the walls. So white the light kicks back into your eyes. You lower your hood and shutter slowly to rest your face. Drops fall from the roof as sparsely as days on a calendar. Each one knocks its own note. The memory keeper hums under the drip. The ceiling sends back a thin ring. "This is a listening room," he says. "In old times, you painted an animal where the animal called." He sets his hand to the stone and finds a low note. This place sounds like heavy feet. In the lamp's shadow you can believe someone painted deer here once. The young hunter, restless, asks to paint. The leader shakes his head. Don't lay your words over old words. The seamstress lifts the ochre pouch. Only the way back. The boy nods and sets a low dot as before, as his hand less shaky. Learning to walk in stone is learning to keep your hand. In the rear passage the ceiling dips. Water streaks the wall like hair. The lamp bows low, the fat burns quicker. The fire tender shares more fat. Warning, don't let the wick eat all the fat. A hungry wick will chew the cup and crack the stone. You tilt the lamp, let the fat run even. The flame settles like an animal under a stroking hand. You reach a mid-shelf of soft earth. The leader plants a tiny stake of bed for the baby if rain squeezes the hearth indoors. You and the seamstress scatter the dry leaves you carried and make a thin grass bed. Beds in stone aren't high. High beds eat wind. Low beds drink warm ground. The mother sets the child down to try. It stirs once and sleeps at once. The drip's a lullaby, she whispers. You sit with your back to the wall, lamp before your knees. The flame throws specks on the roof like a jar of fireflies set loose in a stone sky. The memory keeper takes a charred twig and dots the specks into the map in his head. A firefly map, he says. They'll show the way home if the lamps die. You hear the word if go very light, almost not there. But this season you must learn words you don't want. You stand and pass the lamp to the young hunter. Step back 3 paces so you can see both him and the flame in one frame. The smaller the light, the slower a person must go. In stone, going slow is going fast, the memory keeper says, placing a pebble in your ear. A thick drop falls from the roof and makes the leader lift his head. A big bead drops slow and hits a pool at the wall's foot. Its sound isn't like before, fuller, heavier. Storm ahead. The fire tender nods. The cave is drawing deep breaths because outside is changing. He reaches into a bag and lays more wood near the outer hearth, ready to spend the night at the door. On the way back, the lamp goes first. The warm ochre marks follow like a small coloured shadow. You deliberately don't look again at the negative hand. Every greeting spends a breath, and the outside night will ask for many. In the narrow bend, the boy clips a spur, the lamp tilts, the wick licks the cup's rim. You cup your hand to block wind, straighten the flame, and breathe out long through your nose. The lamp hears the breath and calms. The boy apologizes with his shoulder, not his mouth. In stone, shoulders speak louder than lips. At the mouth, wind combs the grass whiskers like someone's hand. The outer hearth glows steady. The cold well has drunk its fill. The seamstress lays out a hide for the baby, draws up the fur neck wrap, and sets a tiny bone stitch to hold the edge. The needle goes in like pinning wind to cloth no pain. Night lands early on stone shoulders. The leader studies the low clouds through the trees. Whatever passes tonight will tip the river's course a little. The fire tender slides red stones into the water skin. Warmth walks into the bed. The memory keeper dabs an unseen line of ochre on his cheekbone. He doesn't explain. You don't ask. Some marks are for the stone to know, not people. A cave night isn't a forest night. Lying near the door, your ears hear 2 lungs, the cave's lung pulling and pushing air. The hearth's lung pulling and pushing fire. The half-beat between them makes your chest find a 3rd beat sleep. Before you close your eyes, you feel for the bone needle by your pillow. Pinch a strand of sinew tomorrow, you'll lock the baby's wrap again. The wind knocks twice as if asking to leave. The cave exhales long. The hearth inhales short. You breathe lightly in the space between. In your dream, the lamp dots on the roof fly outside and become a flock of fireflies following the nightbird's river in the sky. They don't need lamps, they need stone. You don't need stone, you need tomorrow. Morning, the smell of rain lies very low. The cave's lip is wet, but the hearth is dry. The fire tender wakes the red stones and drops them into water. The seamstress fingers the edge of the baby's wrap and nods. The leader gathers the band, with his eyes a single circle. Enough. The memory keeper frees a hair caught on the child's hood, rolls it, and tucks it into a chest-high crack in the wall. Hair is light, he says. What light remembers law? No one debates it. You carry the fat lamp inside one last time and look along the knee-high dots that point straight out. The flame eats the last fat at the threshold, quite bows low, flicks a small green tongue, and goes quiet. You blow softly to lay the smoke down and nest the stone cup into a niche. The fire goes to sleep in stone. The stone keeps a sentence. Leaving the cave, the day is grey, just. Grass reaches your knees, water clings to the sinews of slick leaves. Today it smells like stone washing its face. Light. Clean. The leader goes first, sets the spear with no sound. The fire tender carries the hearth on his back, its belly laid sideways at his hip like cradling a child. The seamstress brings up the rear, ochre pouch buried deep. The young hunter glances back once at the mouth. You lay half a breath of hand on his shoulder. Enough. By the riverbank, the water bulges at a bend like an animal's back. Not today, the memory keeper says. The path climbs to higher grass. The sun doesn't pour gold. It runs as silver across wet blades. The sound of grass breaking underfoot is not the sound of ice steady. Warm, with no song, you smile into your mouth good. No song is a kind of song. Before you turn into the trees, you look once more at the stone eyelid. The dark pupil is closed, keeping the sleeping lamp within. You raise a hand to shoulder height without waving. It isn't a farewell. It's a hand pressed into the air so the air will remember your hand's size. And you go slow, even carrying a lamp gone out, a stone gone warm, and a map of fireflies that isn't on paper but in your chest. The nightbird's river in the sky doesn't show by day, but you've learned to read it with two lungs, the lung of fire and the lung of stone. You've gone only a little way when the clouds ratchet down another notch. The wind swings sideways, moving under the grass more than over your head. The leader sets his ear to an oak base and hears a sound lying a long time inside the wood. There's a cleft beyond the rock shelf, he says. It sings sideways. Sideways singing means wind crosses from one slope to the other through a closed mouth, neither up nor down. A cleft can give you water and a dry bed. It can also steal breath if you put the hearth wrong. You shoulder the yoke and shift the live coal pouch farther back to free your belly to breathe. The fire tender gives you a birch bark tube stuffed with tinder. If the sky knocks out every light, strike one alive in here. The bark tube is light as hollow bone. You hear the little coal tick inside at each step, a second heart walking with you. The band changes order leader first. Memory keeper center, fire tender last. The seamstress bracing the baby at the young mother's side. The way up to the cleft isn't steep but slick. Mud cuffs your fur shoes at the ankle like a hand holding your joint. You place less heel. More toe, the wood scale soles set down light and still bite the earth. The cleft appears where the grass parts to either side. Its mouth is an animal's sideways yawn. Lips worn smooth limestone. The wind from within is cool as water, but not wet. The memory keeper pinches a fist of hearth ash and flicks it before the opening. The ash flies sideways and falls. It doesn't drink breath, it only trades it. He nods. This could be a bed if the rain comes. The baby wakes, eyes black as seeds. Crosswind doesn't make it cry. It likes looking at hands. The seamstress sits by the wall and holds a hand in front of a small ember lamp cupped in stone, sending a bird flitting along the rock. The baby doesn't laugh, but its eyes widen. You lay your hand beside hers and rake your fingers like a blade of grass. The bird flies past the leaf. The crosswind slides the shadow slowly to the left. The baby's dark eyes follow. The young hunter raises a hand to make a fish. You tilt the stone bowl so the fish swims upstream against the wind. The game has no voice. Everyone breathes small. The memory keeper looks at the shadows and mouths. Shadow is the child of fire. You hear it, that's enough. You don't paint on the wall, you paint on the wind. The shadows vanish when the flame shifts. The memory stays when eyes shift. The baby sleeps again as the bird turns back into a hand. Rain lifts the scent of pine. The leader points to a tree whose old scar is beading resin. You set a stone bowl beneath it. Draw a thin line across the old mark with your chert knife. The resin pushes out like a breath-long held. The fire tender drops in a tiny coal. Sets a thin cover so the smoke goes slow. Black smoke folds into resin and changes the pitcher's voice less quick-tacky, longer strong. You stir hot resin with charcoal dust and lime you scraped from the wall. The glue turns from pale honey to muddy brown. The new little dart head you sharpened at the cave is seated in a groove in the light shaft, bound with sinew, skinned with pitch. You hold it one breath, let go. The glue says good. No words needed. The seamstress wipes a thin smear of warm resin over a fraying edge of the baby's wrap. The pitch combs the fibres down and the wind bites less. The hearth in the bowl breathes tiny. Black smoke draws a fine ring in the rain. The cleft opens into a shallower room, with a roof low enough for ears to hear wind shifting. The leader ties a fine feather to his spear tip and holds it floating at the room's mouth. The feather tilts to one side, then the other, out of rhythm. Tonight we bed across the wind, he says. Beds laid cross-wind are cold. Beds with heads into wind lack breath. Beds set on the diagonal sleep quiet. You score 2 crossing lines in the ground and lay dry grass along that weave. The baby goes right down, its nose stays warm, its cheeks unpulled. The wind is temperate, the mother whispers. You nod. The hearth is set another body farther. The cold well dug more than half a palm off, so smoke goes one way and breath the other. The memory keeper brings a hollow dry length of wood, props it on 2 stones, and taps a very slow pulse not to call. To count, 1 beat per breath. 10 beats make a rest. You lean on the wall, close your eyes, and count along. The lamp in the bowl goes very even, the shadow on the vault barely wavers. The seamstress pillows the baby's head with a fur pouch and pins a bone stitch through the edge so the head won't roll. The drum's beat goes from ear to chest to belly, and settles at the navel that's the door of dreams. You can tell how deep the others have gone by how they breathe. The leader still breathes short, head listening to wind. The fire tender breathes even, turning the wick. The memory keeper breathes like he's speaking to stone. The young hunter's breath stumbles, then fewer better than last night. You rest your hand on your knee and count to 10 again and again, not to fall deep asleep, but to stay with the fire. Around midnight, the water's voice in the cleft rises on its own. Not louder, just change from a low run to a slide. The leader signals eyes open. You and the boy tie sinew belts to your waists, the other ends to the door stake, and take the feeler tongue a long switch, weighted with a smooth stone at one end, and padded with dry cloth at the other. You send the tongue first touching earth, touching water, touching the shift of air. After 10 breaths, you meet a lip where water from the mountain back spills down a shallow step. The lamp rides behind you, its light lifts to the roof and softens the road. The feeler touches the water a very new cold. The leader won't let you go on. He draws a diagonal on the ground and motions the turn. Knowing when to stop is also a way of going. Back again. The hearth is still red. The fire tender pours warm water into his skin and hands it to the boy. His throat has been talking to the wind. You stand the feeler by the wall and set a pebble on the padded end, a reminder to change the cloth tomorrow. Morning, and the rain falls just so. You follow the leader to the cleft south face where limestone opens black little pockets. In the pockets, chert-hard nodules the size of fists, skins wrinkled like roots. You lever them out with a stick and pack them into a bone sack lined with grass. The fire tender scoops a shallow bed of sand, lays 2 layers of red coals, tucks the chert in, covers with sand, then ash, then a few sticks. The heat lies, it doesn't sing. The heat mustn't run hot, chert mustn't get angry. You sit beside it, counting breaths and turning the ash with every stanza on the log drum. The smell of warming stone is hard to catch. Only the changed smell of ash tells you. The memory keeper reminds you, when stone eats fire, stone gives back sound. You smile you heard it yesterday when the stone broke clean. By noon you turn the bed. The chert inside has dulled slightly, its face smoothed. You tap with antler. The sound is firm without being shrill. The stone has learned the language of hands. You store it away to nap at night. The leader wants a light point for waterbirds along the boggy bank beneath the woods. You sit on a dry slab, set chert on your thigh, and draw the antler billet. First stroke beds, second opens, third shells a flake. Thin scales fly like fish. Along the edge tiny teeth line up like grass. You pinch in a small off-axis barb with bone so the point speaks cold in the wind, no howl, no hiss. It just goes. The seamstress fletches the tail with the bird down, the sinew taking a faint spiral. You test on grass, a waist-high throw. The point travels straight like a word carried closed. The leader nods halfway enough. By late day the wind stops crossing and settles back toward the river. The memory keeper opens the ochre and shares a millet-sized grain with each of you. He doesn't talk of gods or law. He talks of breath. Each season the wind changes its name. Leave the old name on the stone, set the new one on the brow. You dab ochre to your brow ridge at the right eyebrow. The seamstress paints a narrow bar on the baby's hood. The leader dots the tip of his nose so it smells true. The fire tender draws a thin line from chin to throat so breath runs easy. The young hunter paints himself. The mark a little crooked. No one straightens it. A name must be set by the one who bears it. You sit by the hearth and the leader speaks very slowly the words that don't make a sentence go slow. Hear stone, open brow, close mouth. Fire lies, hearth breathes. Each word goes into the fire, turns to a thin smoke, rises to the cleft's roof, and thins away. The right ends with a pebble placed in your palm. Carry it, he says. When you forget the cadence, grip it. At night rain stands on the vault like 1,000 small feet. You nap by the hearth with the lamp set low, smoke moving sideways. The fire tender tends the wick in silence. The smell of fat moves into the stone and the stone chills less. The boy practices setting his hand to the wall, exactly on the ochre dot hand first, eyes after. The seamstress adds 2 stitches to the lamp strap so tomorrow you can walk one-handed if you must. At the bed's edge, the young mother changes the baby's neck wrap and rubs fat into its cheeks. It breathes short and even, no whistle at the nose. You hear the note enough rise from the hearth. Before sleep, the memory keeper reminds you. The waters push past in the night. Morning will be dry. He tucks a dead coal into his pouch to give the hearth a greeting at dawn. Dawn the cleft returns the wind to the forest. The soil at the mouth is half dry enough for feet to speak softly. The leader wipes the ochre from the wall with his palm, leaving only a single small way back mark at another corner. Don't stuff stone with words. Stone grows heavy when overwritten. You walk out on your heels, scoring a very faint line in the dirt. The young hunter follows. Setting his toes in your trace, the line fades fast in the sun. That's how paths should fade. The fire tender slings the hearth, its belly facing back. The seamstress wears the ochre at her chest and keeping the small light. The memory keeper walks centre and lays a hand on your shoulder, one breath-light hand, warm bone. No words. The grass shifts from wet to warm quickly as the sun climbs a finger. Above, the clouds shred into bands, and a flock reads a river in the air with their wings. The nightbird's water row doesn't set lanterns by day, but it lays shade on the grass. You remember last night's firefly map on the roof, and connecting the sunspots through the leaves into a traverse across the slope. Maps on Earth are easier than maps on stone, but they fade easier too. The leader points out a gritty patch by the forest edge, a place to quick dress a fresh point. You lay a whisper bevel and set the teeth. The boy sits 2 paces off and dresses another more slowly. The rasp of your 2 nappings are half a beat apart, playing one song. Ahead, the river opens into shallow white stones lifting like animals' backs. The leader probes 3 points with his staff, first to the knee, second to the thigh, third pushes back hard. Crossable, he says, but cold. The young mother tightens the baby, looks at you. You look at the fire tender. He nods halfway. Crossing is a lesson in cadence. You belay a sinew line to the far bank and turn it on a stake. The fire tender goes first with the hearth. Holding the belly high, you go after the leader between steady shoulders. The water bites the calves, the wood-scale soles bite the stones. The baby doesn't cry. The river wind has a very old smell. It sounds like a lullaby to it. On the bank, the seamstress offers a fur towel. The neck wrap is swapped at once, fat rubbed into knees. The fire tender drops red stones into the water skin to chase out the cold. The leader counts 10 breaths for all. At 11, the breathing is even. You laugh inside your throat. Crossing water without burning breath is a fine lesson. The memory keeper hands you a thin plate of bone the width of 2 fingers, scored with very fine marks, each mark a night, each double cut a storm. He passes you the knife. Strike 1, he says. You nick a very shallow line, just the tremor you still have after the water. Bone speaks just enough. The bone notebook doesn't tell stories, it counts. You tuck it away and hear it click against the new chirp points, a dry, satisfying sound. The sun comes to stand overhead. Shadows draw into your shins, walking without shadows, walking without eyes. The leader chooses a broadleaf trunk and sets the hearth at the edge of its shade. That way the fire eats breath half from sun, half from forest. Smoke goes up politely. You nap a short while with your head on your arm, the other hand holding the pebble from the right. When the pebble slips, you wake. That's the stone's clock. The boy doesn't sleep. He dresses the wood-scale soles a touch to smooth the fuzz after the water. The seamstress mends a small tear at your hood edge, the bone needle moving like a fish breathing. You breathe with the needle. Toward evening, the path leads back into open woods. The soil here has a warm scent. The memory keeper scratches 3 dots and a short line on the inside of a birchbark manganese black. 3 dots for 3 nights in stone, the short line for the water, he says. You pocket the bark like a soft firefly map. Before you go too far from the cleft, the leader sets a round stone at his mouth and sprinkles a little ash on top. A gift back to stone, he says. Stone keeps a scent for us. You lay beside it a thin flake of broken chert. The rock receives an old edge and returns to you several new ones. A clean bargain. Dusk rises like a big fish lifting its head from the river toward the trees. The wind changes its name again. This one sits heavy on the right shoulder. You shift the yoke so the hearth's body leans on the left. Moving the ache moves the house. The hearth is set on a shallow bed of sand, the well dug wider. The fire tender drops a dry pine twig slicked with resin. The flame eats the resin tip and reddens like a nocturnal fruit. You sit across with the thin ochre still on your brow, ridge the morning's mark unfaded. The wind's new name still held. The memory keeper speaks a short piece, with no clear beginning or end about someone who went into stone, set a hand on a wall, blew ochre round it, and came out to make a bird point, a neck wrap, a bed for a child, and a new name for the wind. The story goes into the fire like a smoke-stroke learning the road. At night you count the fire with your eyes open when it inhales, close when it exhales. Bed set on the diagonal as taught. The baby sleeps with rosy cheeks. You tuck the bone needle at your pillow's edge and the pebble into your palm and close your hand. In your dream, the cave's firefly map turns into the star map of the sky. The nightbird's water road runs crosswise and guides you toward a broad, warm grassland where the earth will teach your hands a new trick, see down and wait for rain. But that's another day's story. Very early, you wake to the faintest sound, the pebble slipping from your hand and tapping the ground. The stone's clock says enough. You open your eyes, the fire is still red, the wind has changed back to its old name. The leader looks at you, half a smile in his eyes. A new day arrives without noise. You rise, fold the hides, cinch the hearth, pull the hood down over your brow, the ochre pale now. You touch the last bit of resin on your finger to the spear shaft, a greeting to the fire in wood. The road ahead opens by shadow. You count 3 breaths and set the first step, and so you go slow, even carrying a lamp that's gone out, a stone that's warm, the wind's new name written on your brow, and the firefly map in your chest. You leave the rock cleft before the mist has time to remember its own name. The fine streak of red ochre on your brew bone has half faded under a skin of dried sweat. Yet the wind's new name still lies there, quiet as a thin thread hidden beneath a fur hood. The leader gives the slightest nod. The firekeeper shifts the fire's belly to ride snug along his left flank. The memory keeper closes the thin bone tally with its notches so the little ritual pebble can rest obedient in his palm. The child stirs under the throat scarf, breathing as evenly as sleeping coals. You touch the shaft of your newly honed spear, dab a whisper of resin from your fingertip onto the wood as a greeting to the fire, and step after the path the shadows have already opened through the grass. Today the warm grassland breathes differently from yesterday by one quiet exhale. The smell of earth rides higher. Dampness settles lower. Waterbirds skim low along the mud's lip, leaving neat comb marks of their toes like writing half readable, half not. You walk slowly, the wood-scale soles biting the still sodden ground so your steps don't click. Since last night the wind has changed names, no longer crossing the mouth of the cleft, but flowing with the grass. The group stretches into a thin ribbon. The memory keeper walks in the middle, lays a hand on your shoulder for exactly one breath, enough to remind you today is a day to travel and listen more than to speak. You see at first a sparse vein of wild grain, heads as long as half a palm, fine awns like little fingers catching sun. They sway when you pass, not afraid, not greeting, just counting light. They stand on a strip of bare soil under the grass, where last year perhaps an antlered beast furrowed through, or perhaps someone tossed a handful of husks while eating by a hearth. Fire looked across the earth. Earth remembered. The grass learned. The leader tilts his head, speaking almost only by scent. This ground is like a seed. The firekeeper slips the hearth from his shoulder, scoops a shallow saucer in the sand, buries a live coal so the fire lies and breathes. Smoke climbs in a very well-behaved line. His finger rakes the soil beneath the wild heads and lifts a film of little shell chips like dry fish scales, caught in the nails groove husks of heads that have shed. He looks at you without a word. You understand this spot has been a place of mouths chewing and hands scattering, maybe your own from days before you had a name. Maybe those who walked long before your name. Earth remembers scent. Wind remembers paths. Stone remembers the sound of hands. The young companion squats and pulls from his pouch a flat board of wood the size of 2 palms, shallow grooves already scored along it. He looks at you, eyes a little bright, as if asking without words, "Do we try it?" You nod, but not yet. You want to listen more? You kneel on your knees, bring your nose a palm above the ground, and smell. Seed has no strong odour. What rises is old ash braided with rotted grass, the old voice of a story whispering again. The ground here has been warm. The ground here has been fed. You touch dust with a fingertip, then set it on your tongue. The earth says old sweet. The seamstress comes to sit beside you and draws out a small piece of antler, soft as the flesh of a ripe fruit, then passes it over. Along it sit tiny chert teeth already ground, set into the grooves with smoke-cut resin so their edges make a fine serrated line like a run of grass. The board's handle is wrapped tight with deer hide so sweat won't slip the grip. She puts the tool in your hands. Try it on the Longbeards first, she says, voice hardly more than nose and hand. Don't bite deep. You set the little teeth against a tuft. Draw backward very slowly. Straighten your spine so the awns don't brush your face. The sound of kernels striking the hide spread across your knees is like small rain on dry leaves. There is no blood smell, no pain, sound only seed. You pull a second time, a third, each stroke as long as a single breath. The leader watches without stepping into your motion, only listening. The memory keeper sits farther off, raking the ground for old husks, slipping them into a separate bag perhaps to tell the night's fire the earth's old story. You grasp what had only been a dream shadow at the door of sleep. There are days when hands must do work lighter than a spear but longer than time. The husky kernels roll in your palm, gritty, glittering like sand under the sun. They don't run like beasts, don't fly like birds, don't thrash like fish. They lie, they listen, they wait. You glance toward the hearth where the thin smoke goes up and think of the fine black under the fire's belly and the bits of husk clinging to a bag's lip. Fire and earth both know how to love on the tongue of seed. No one hurries to fill a bag. The leader jerks his chin toward a lower patch where something with big hooves has churned the soil recently. He passes you a pinch of the kernels you've pulled and winks. You know the game, not planting, not taking over, only keeping silence from swallowing. You walk to the torn patch and open your hand very low. The dry grain disperses like breath-meeting mist. No ceremony, no song. Only one step there and one step back. The young mother brings the child, opens its tiny palm, lays a few seeds there, lifts and tilts. The seed falls. The eyes are black. It doesn't understand, but the earth does. The wind will remember. The firekeeper hums a rhythm too small for words and returns to the hearth. He scoops back a lip of sand so the fire's mouth faces wind, crumbles in a few dry leaves so smoke doesn't clump but thins, leaving less writing up the sky. He doesn't want anyone far off to know a hearth sat here for more than one long breath. The young companion brings a tiny stone lamp from a birchbark pouch fat for the bowl, moss for the wick. He lights it low and sets it in the hearth's shadow to let the sheen of resin on your tool handle catch one thin glimmer. Everything only a little no more, no less enough for the hand to remember. You keep drawing seed, as steady as honing an edge. Every pull carries the crisp tick of chert teeth against dry husk short. Clean, without snagging. The smoke-cut resin holds each minute tooth in the groove. You know you must warm the tool's edge tonight so the resin softens and sets again, like repeating a word so it lies properly inside the mouth. The seamstress bends to examine the serrations and smiles a small smile. You say nothing, but the fire hears. By late morning your chest bag hangs with a heft of seed. Not heavy like meat, not warm like fat, not alive like fish, another sort of weight. You pass the bag to the memory keeper so he can steady your stride and pull a soft hide flask to sip. Then you pour half a mouthful into your palm. To rinse the fine dust from your finger webs. Water says cool. Along the river edge a few sedge blades rasp each other faintly. The water birds loop back, not afraid of hearth or human, as if you were long a piece of the grass. You and the young companion work the damp rim to look for bulbs. Little white umbels of wild onion nod on thin stems, telling of good things under soft soil. You shake free a layer and find bulbs the size of fingertip joints. Not many. You don't pull them all, you twist only the big, old ones and fold the earth back so the small can lie. You take one bulb, slide it into a separate pouch, and after the hearth cools you'll tuck it in warm ash at the rim not to make a field. but to let this place remember the smell of bulbs a little more for next season. All these small, such ordinary moves have no names or laws, only fingers learning to speak farther than arm's length. The firekeeper whistles through his nose. You look up. On the meadow's rim, fresh deer prints. The soil holds 2 split toes, deep enough to say a heavy doe carrying hunger past here. The leader's eyes say it this evening. We make a wide loop, don't push the herd. Only count. You nod. Your palm slides along the fine new dart head you honed last night, the 2 sheets of resin now dry. A veiled twist of tendon hidden between them holds your hand's scent. That scent is for your remembering, not for the animal. At noon the sun sits taut as a drumhead. Shadows curl to the feet and hide all roads. You pick a tree with a broad crown and set the hearth at the shade's edge so smoke still obeys the wind and doesn't wrap your throat. The seamstress checks the lamp strap, adds 2 stitches at the hem so this evening your hand can draw the lamp without dropping it. The memory keeper takes out his thin bone and scratches a very shallow notch, exactly the tremor of a hand stepping ashore from yesterday's water. He doesn't say season, doesn't say year, he says night enough with 1 cut. Then he passes the sliver for the child to touch. The child's cool palm presses the notch to sleep beneath the skin. No one sleeps hard. Everyone lies down. Everyone breathes. After a while, the young companion done watching black ants march under roots brings the serrated tool near the hearth, warms the edge, dabs a grain of resin, pulls for a breath, then blows. The smell of warm resin plats with hearth fat into a small sound inside the nose. He looks at you and his eyes ask, enough. You run a finger along the teeth, the tiny ruff says, ready. He smiles with his eyes. You smile in your throat. The child breathes steadily. When the tree's shade begins to stretch its legs again, the group shifts toward the higher rim. The leader won't sit in one place too long, not even where the earth likes seed. He asks you to leave something the earth will remember that not everyone can read. You think of the birch bark scrap with 3 dots and 1 short line the memory keeper drew last time. Not today. You set 3 flat pebbles in the shape of a small leaf beside a seam of ash. You pinch a few stray kernels from the hide and breathe them across. So seed lies on seed without becoming dust or a pile. That is your script for the ground. No one but the wind can read it for you. The evening path pulls the group along a sparse wood. You pace beside the firekeeper to learn the look of a ripe plume of smoke. A heart that sleeps well walks without being watched, he murmurs. Smoke must rise by the wind's name, not by the fire's will. He tips the hearth, opens a cold pit on the hearth's side, another half-finger deep. Here is the mouth the fire breathes in, and here he nods at the little vent he's cut. The mouth it breathes out. If the wind changes names, change the mouths. You learn with nose, with eye, with throat, and both cool palms holding the hearth, then set all that learning in a quiet place. When the sun touches the scrub's rim, you hear the land's cough rabbits easing out of holes to test the wind's taste. The leader forbids snares here and points toward a square of grass burned long ago. Now that spot is greener than around it. Sometimes we take, sometimes we return, he says. You remember the elders' stories of laying a low fire to call back tender shoots for animals to feed, then humans after them. It isn't a fire for every day. You must know the wind's names, and which soil eats fire without shouting. You inhale deep. Tonight's wind is kind. You don't kindle. You remember. You stop at the lip of a small open swale thick with reed. Water sits, quiet, at your feet. No lamp yet. You kneel and reach the feeler tongue, a long branch wrapped with dry cloth at the tip over the skin of water. Cool, sweet. You lift a pinch of mud, smear it thin across your palm, feel the hair-fine roots. This muck is fit for small seeds to lie without washing away when the rain comes. But you think again seed knows its own lying. Your hand should help the ground recall direction. You set the mud back and wipe your hand on grass to return water's smell to water, and rise with the hearth's breathing on the firekeeper's shoulder. When day just clicks shut, the memory keeper begins to speak not a single tale, but short blocks stood side by side like a row of round pebbles. He speaks of seasons when the wind changed names 4 times instead of 3. Of herds shifting their path because a fire patch burned too hot, of children who first pressed hands to rock and blew ochre around them, leaving a visible no-on stone an empty palm of light. He tells of a time long back when someone lifted a tuft of grass heavy with seed and tucked it into warm ash by a hearth so the seeds could take the ash's smell Next season they return to find grass standing thicker there. He doesn't call it planting. He calls it helping the earth remember. You listen and watch smoke go. Smoke crosses the sky, breathing even. The child sleeps early, cheeks warm from within, nose clear. The seamstress checks the stitches on the throat scarf, rubs a film of fat into the fur's edge so wind won't bite the sleeping throat. The young companion sags by the fire, eyes liquid as if he might slide away, but still fingers the serrated edge like someone learning to sleep with a new tool in his hand without letting it slip away from the dream. The leader doesn't sleep. His eyelids are as thin as a grass blade, while his ears listen 4 ways: wind, water, fire, earth. Late, the stars open. The firefly map of the cave now lies on the sky clearer, also farther. The memory keeper tilts his head back and names a few streaks with very short words: water road, deer back, fish jaw, coal eye. He doesn't say north or south, he says hearth hand, spear hand, child hand. You follow his pointing and see a pale smear like very fine ash, breathed evenly from some enormous hearth, running like the night bird's water road. You count a slow 10 and let your eyes fall. Your ears hear insects pull up stools under grass. Your back hears the ground. The pebble clock loosens half out of your palm. At some point you find yourself standing without stirring the hearth. You go to the swale where the soft mud was once smoothed by your hand. You open the chest bag and take a pinch of seed more than one breath, less than a meal. You bow very low, fingers open like a soft serration, and let the seed fall. You don't cover, you don't press. You touch the mud one very light time as a greeting. You stand and see the seeds in starlight and do not name them. If they wish to lie, they will lie. If they wish to go, the wind knows the way. You turn back to the hearth. The firekeeper reads you, not with eyes, but with nose. He flicks a tiny lift of chin. Yes. The leader smiles in his eyes. Yes. The seamstress draws a fine tendon from her bag and ties it loose around your wrist as if worried the wind might forget this hand. The child shifts and sighs. You sit, open your palm so the pebble slides out, and set it on the ground by the fire. While you sleep, the pebble will speak to the earth for you. This is our bed, for tonight's short. Enough. You dream a very thin dream. Your hand learns to lay down seed, but your heart still walks the meadow with spear and gut cord. In the dream you never cast, you count hoofsteps into mist, the click of grass when a forest bull turns, the rhythm of wind over water's back. The dream doesn't say wild or plot. Plough or reap, only go and wait, in one long, slow word. When you wake, you know the dream isn't yours alone, it is the group's dream. The dream of hands under many seasons with winds under many names. The dream of a heart that learned to speak softly. The dream of ground that learned to remember. Morning grey before gold. People rise almost all at once, like fish breathing together when the water changes rhythm. You test the serrations, fix a shyly tilted flake by warming the resin and pressing it true. The firekeeper thumps the hearth belly so coals collapse, then hides the hearth in sand so the sign lingers less. The memory keeper scratches a short mark on the bone. This notch lies between 2 night marks. A way of saying that night had 2 voices, the seeds and the winds. The leader walks the rim and gathers dropped gut strings, dots a thin ochre stain on a chosen trunk. Before you go, you return to last night's mud. The seed says nothing. The night was too short to ask for a speech. You don't seek a word. You only bend and set your palm on the mud for a moment, then lift. Water clings in a very thin skin, cool and sweet. You go back, tie your bag, shoulder the hearth, and walk the road shadows have prepared. The child is tucked into the fur sling on his mother's chest. Eyes open just enough to watch dew along the grass, whiskers little strings of light like rows of bone notches carved in the air. The way leads into a low wood where thin-barked trees stand upright like big sleeping fish. You pause at a trunk once cut for resin. The old wound has dried into a black mouth. With your chert point, you score a shallow line along its lip and set a stone bowl beneath, then warm a coal to coax sap. The firekeeper adds a little smoke, stirs until the pitch changes the voice, then strokes a narrow ring along your tool's edge. The move is like editing a story just told so it sits better in a future ear. There are no bombs falling here, only resin. You smile at the notion, though no one knows what bomb is. Inside your teeth the word is a stray pebble. Cloud carts roll fast and the wind shifts names again. The new name a little heavier on your back. You move the hearth to your left shoulder so your right stays free for the spear. The leader strides broader, his eyes counting swath by swath, which grass beds down first, which wakes by smell, which wakes by sound. When he stops, all stop. He breaks a dry reed stem and hands half to you, half to the young one. Smell, he says. Reed's scent is rain already gone, a resting wind, a small river's heart. After smelling, listen, he says. You don't catch it at once. But when you set the reed on the ground, you hear a faint scratch wind travelling toward the reed along the reed's lean. Sometimes the nose and ear are one. By midday, the deer show far out along a clearing's rim. No one lifts a spear. The group slides into the shade of a low shrub and kneels so eyes rest level with grass backs. Deer don't walk straight. They move like wind curving a little, placing feet only where ground agrees. The leader's finger draws a line in the air linking 3 bright marks from the earlier to the earth's shadow lying on the animals' backs. He whispers, don't follow their rumps, don't get in their noses, walk along with their breath. The line isn't for today's hunt. It is for some day when your hands would like to run faster than your ears. The deer are gone, never knowing your name. You stand, shake your knees, and watch the sun smooth faint gold along the grass. The memory keeper lays a hand on your shoulder for one breath and gives you the bone. Cut, he says. You scratch a very fine notch. It feels like a small smile in your throat today, your hands laid down seed, while your heart kept listening for hoofbeats. The two are not forks of one track, they are 2 beats of one breath. As the afternoon halves, you, the seamstress, and the young companion return to the wild grain. This time your pull is quicker, not from haste, but from hand memory. You roll some cut heads into a hide, tie with gut, and sling them to dry. Loose kernels lie quiet in a bag. The seamstress glances from her knots to the sun, and says through her nose the wind will change names once more before dark. You nod and wish it would come off the river so the night's smoke goes low. Before the sun is lost, you and the firekeeper gather dry grass and twigs over a patch of ground the size of 2 bodies, far from the hearth so no one confuses the sign. You bend and coax a small flame, shelter the wind so it eats slowly and dies quick, only enough to call the scent of fire for the land to taste. The firekeeper smothers it with sand the moment the flame turns once on its spine. You don't wait for smoke to vanish. You leave a mark that is very low made of smell, made of hand-scattered ash. If you return next season, the grass here will be 1 beat tender than around it. If someone else comes, they won't read your name in the ash. Only the earth reads, and that is enough. The 7th night of this run arrives quietly. You set the bed cross-wind as you learned in the cleft. You dig the cold pit at the hearth's rim so smoke goes right. Breath goes right. The child drinks a few warm swallows from the hide bottle, tongue meeting the fat scent, eyes dim in the mother's arms. The young one pillows his head on a fur bag and holds the serrated board the way someone holds a thin bone of tomorrow's story. The seamstress sets the bone needle at the pillow's hem, as every night, so the head won't roll. The memory keeper draws out the hollow log and taps a very slow beat. Each beats a breath. Each 10 beats a drop of silence. You watch the hearth. Tonight the fire's inhale is longer than its exhale. Quietly you think from the day you pressed your hand to the cave wall and blew ochre around it to leave a visible no, to now laying seed with no blowing at all, only a touch, your hand is no longer the same hand. Yet your thumb still knows how to snug gut to a dart head. Your forefinger still knows the feel of serrated edge. Your middle finger still knows how to warm resin just enough. Your ring finger still knows how to cup a child's skull without waking it. Your little finger still knows how to tap stone for sound. The whole hand is a little group. The whole group is one big hand. You close on the pebble. The stone clock is cooler than last night. Tonight's wind comes off the river. You count fire with eyes open when it breathes in, close when it breathes out. Each closing is 1 seed dropping in memory, each opening 1 grass blade rising there. No song is sung, yet the log drum's pace moves into your spine and talks to your vertebrae in a language older than any you know. Somewhere inside your chest a thin road ties hearth to dim mud, cold pit to river, bone needle to serrated edge, ochred rock hand to the palm that lays seed. That road needs no map. You don't know when the pebble slips and ticks on the ground. When you open your eyes, fire is still red, stars still spare, wind still moves across the hearth. The leader looks at you with eyes not fully awake and nods like nodding at a cricket that has played true. The firekeeper draws a long breath and eases the hearth into a different lying without killing the ember. You turn, lift the scarf higher, and shut your eyes again. Before you sink into the second sleep, a map comes to mind, not of fireflies, not of stars, but of seeds. They lie like a thin ring around the hearth. Like an ash halo, a map for sitting, not for going. In the morning, and when dew turns into very fine needles on the grass and birds abruptly change flight like a hand tipping, you stand, tie the bag, shoulder the hearth, lift the spear. You do not go back to last night's mud. No need. Earth and wind will remember for you. The memory keeper folds the thin bone, pats it the way one pats a child's back. The seamstress pulls the hood over the child and kisses the place on its brow where the ochre mark had faded the other day, as gently as setting a seed in the child's chest. The young companion looks at you, mouth silent, eyes saying, "Next time." You nod, "Next time." The group goes slow. Even ahead, a new sandbank, behind an old smoke trace already gone. In your bag, seed and serration. In your chest, a just right pocket of quiet. Your back remembers the wind's name. Your feet remember the earth's. Your hands have learned a new trick without forgetting the old. Sometime after the sun clears the tree line, so you speak to yourself, no sound. Only the tongue set to the palate, the way you hush a child by the hearth. Any day the hand lays seed, and the heart still hears hoofbeats that day, is enough. You don't know the memory keeper is thinking almost the same sentence, only with another image, when the hearth knows how to lie and still travel, when smoke knows how to travel and still lie. Both are true. Both are the group's voice. And the story of these 7 nights told with church serrations or red ochre, with smoke-cut pitch or cool pebble, comes back to one rhythm count breath. Listen to wind. Greet the earth. Let the fire lie. Then go. You go. Somewhere behind you, by hearths barely already gone dim, a pinch of seed lies in the damp. It doesn't need you to stand guard. Wind knows their road. Earth knows their words. When the wind's name has changed 3 times and the stars knit their band again, you will return. Or someone else will. It doesn't matter who. What matters is that a human foot comes to sit quietly beside it, and lays a hand once very lightly on the ground, and says a sentence without sound. We are here. Earth will answer with scent. Fire will answer with breath. Grass will answer with small sounds. And you, the one carrying a darkened lamp on your shoulder, the one holding a pebble in your mind, will answer by staying longer than one breath. The night bird's water road will still cross above the oak tops tonight and other nights, and vanish toward where tomorrow calls. And you, adding 1 more year of stone to your hand each day as will keep going slow, even carrying fire that has learned to speak softly, stone that has learned to eat fire, the wind's new name, and old ochre streaks inside the same hood. There will be hours when your hand lowers a spear, hours when your hand lowers seed, and many more when your hand sets all down and closes on the pebble. Each time you hold it, the stone clock summons you to the same hour. Enough. And enough, here, is simply 1 more breath, 1 more step, 1 more day that does not hurt the earth. Before we close tonight's hearth, sit a little longer by the fire already speaking low. Smoke goes very well by the day's last wind, thin as a thread someone just hid in hair. Around you the signs of 7 nights remain, the faded ochre on your brow, the serrated edge rewarmed with resin, the fine notched bone sliver, 3 pebbles in a leaf shaped by ash, the cold pit cut to the wind so the fire breathes calmly. The child sleeps quietly under the scarf. The seamstress sets the needle straight. The firekeeper lays his palm on the hearth's belly. The memory keeper folds the thin bone into his pouch. You look once more up at the sky's firefly map, the streaks that are guided from the rock cleft, across grassland, along the riverbank, into the doorway of dreams. If you open your palm, the pebble is already cool. The stone clock says the hour of enough has come. Let the pebble speak what remains for you. Tonight you don't have to hold everything. Earth will remember seeds. Wind will remember paths. Water will remember the sound of steps. Fire will remember the rhythm of breathing. Remind your body like reminding a heart to change its breathing mouth so sleep can come back. Feet slacken as when you stand by mud's lip testing. With the feeler tongue. Toes uncouple. Warm enough. Like thin ash. Calves soften like grass after rain. Each tightened string loosens like dry awns after a few pulls. Knees, hips, Spines settle to the ground the way you set a birch bark scrap by the hearth, quiet and true. Shoulders leave the day, arms grow heavy like a spear shaft late in the night. Hands open lightly as when letting seed fall. Neck, jaw, tongue. Release. The tongue doesn't need to summon wind or set names. Lids close like the cover on a cold pit. Inside is just enough warmth for the ember to rest. Now breathe like the fire in 1, 2, 3 like a hearth borrowing wind to breathe in. Hold 1, 2 like a palm holding the rim of hide so seed won't spill. Out 1, 2, 3, 4 longer. Like smoke going by the wind's chosen name. Repeat a few rounds. Each round, the body grows 1 layer quieter. Each layer, the day leaves like a chert flake dropping from a groove when you true the serration. If scraps of the day still flicker a deer step at the clearing's edge, water touching a bank, a soft mud lane. An unnamed question let them pass like birds changing course. Don't keep, don't chase. They will find the night bird's water road and slide over the treetops toward where morning calls. You may tell yourself 1 very small line, just enough for your throat to hear I have done my share of the day. For over 7 nights we have gone the old way, walking slowly by wind, eating margins by the hearth, speaking to stone with smoke-cut pitch, leaving marks for earth with pebbles, learning the sky's changing names. We have hunted and waited, honed and warmed, notched and erased. Set your hand to rock and set seed to mud. Nothing needs more haste than sleep now. If you like, place a soft sign for yourself. Imagine 3 flat pebbles by your pillow, 1 for earth, 1 for water, or 1 for wind. Fire is the warmth under your sternum. Each exhale. Rearrange those pebbles in thought so morning finds the way. No need to look, only know the sign is there. Remember the firekeeper's small lesson. A hearth that sleeps well walks without being watched. Sleep is the same, don't stare at it. Glance aside to the hand at rest, the imagined hearth belly, the thin smoke. When you look aside, sleep will come by itself and lay a cool hand on your brow where the first day's ochre has faded. If a noise wakes in your room, the airbox changing pace, a far car, the house breathing turn it into something you know, wind changing names along grass, water rubbing a bank, the hearth's light tremor when the cold pit opens, the memory keeper tapping the log very slow. Every sound has a place to lie still. Maybe tomorrow, when you wake, you'll still carry a few bright shreds from the 7 nights how to read the Firefly map, how to cut a cold pit, the smell of smoke-cut resin, the feel of seed falling like small rain on dry leaves, the rule to walk along the breath. Carry them, or forget them, it's fine. What needs to remain has already been placed in your own ground, the private earth you spread beneath your back each night. Before we darken the hearth, let us thank the little group around you, even if only in thought. The firekeeper holding rhythm, the seamstress snugging the throat scarf, the memory keeper carving 1 fine notch more, the leader listening 4 ways, the sleeping child giving everyone a reason to speak softly. They are here so you don't have to stay awake alone, just as the old ones never walk the far meadow alone. Now lay your palm over the hearth's belly lightly. The red will sink like an eye closing. Smoke will thin until it becomes nothing. The imagined cold pit gets covered with a sheet of sand. The 3 pebbles by the ash sit in their right shape. The day's last wind name has been called enough times. The rest belongs to night. Breathe in once more long, hold a beat, then breathe out slowly to the end of the line. Hands grow warm, feet settle into the mattress like pressing into damp grass. Shoulders weigh like a sack of seed already full. Brow cool as pebble. Eyelids are the hearth lid, sealing the warmth. If you're still awake, stay here. No counting, no effort. The night bird's water road will pass across your ceiling, drifting by your breath. It knows the way. It has carried generations through nights longer than this one. It will carry you. Sleep well. Sleep deep. Sleep by the stone's hour. I'll keep watching 1 more beat until the hearth in our thoughts goes out, and then I'll go on tiptoe, as the firekeeper leaves a hearth without a sound. When you open your eyes some morning soon, if you wish, we will kindle again, call a new wind's name, and walk a little farther, perhaps across a new valley, perhaps to where the dew lays its hand on grass another way. For tonight, this is enough. Good night.